The Game by Niel Strauss, read by Dexter Fletcher. The house was a disaster. Doors were split and smashed off their hinges. Walls were dented in the shape of fists, phones, and flower pots. Herbal was hiding in a hotel room scared for his life, and Mystery was collapsed on the living room carpet crying. He'd been crying for 2 days straight. This wasn't a normal kind of crying. Mystery was out of control. For a week, he'd been vacillating between periods of extreme anger and jags of fitful, cathartic sobbing. Now, he was threatening to kill himself. There were 5 of us living in the house: Herbal, Mystery, Papa, Playboy, and me. Boys and men came from every corner of the globe to shake our hands, take photos with us, learn from us, be us. They called me Style. It was a name I had earned. We never used our real names, only our aliases. Even our mansion had a nickname. It was Project Hollywood, and Project Hollywood was in a shambles. The sofas and dozens of pillows lining the floor of the sunken living room were fetid and discolored with the sweat of men and the juices of women. The white carpet had gone gray from the constant traffic of young, perfumed humanity herded in off Sunset Boulevard every night. And Mystery's rampage during the last few days had left the rest of the place totaled and the residents petrified. He was 6'5" and hysterical. "I can't tell you what this feels like," he choked out. "I don't know what I'm going to do, but it will not be rational." He reached up and punched the stained red upholstery of the sofa as the siren wail of his despondency grew louder, filling the room with the sound of a grown male who has lost every characteristic that separates man from infant, from animal. He wore a gold silk robe that was several sizes too small. The ends of the sash just barely met to form a knot, and the curtains of the robe hung half a foot apart, revealing a pale, hairless chest, and below it, saggy gray Calvin Klein boxer shorts. The only other item of clothing on his trembling body was a winter cap pulled tight over his skull. It was June in Los Angeles. "This living thing, it's so pointless." He turned and looked at me through wet, red eyes. There was no one else in the house. I would have to deal with this. I couldn't let Mystery die on my watch. He was more than just a friend. He was a mentor. He changed my life. I needed to get him Valium, Xanax, Vicodin, anything. I grabbed my phone book and scanned the pages for people most likely to have pills. People like guys in rock bands, women who just had plastic surgery, former child actors. But everyone I called wasn't home, didn't have any drugs, or claimed not to have any drugs because they didn't want to share. There was only one person left to call, the woman who had triggered Mystery's downward spiral. She was a party girl. She must have something. Katia, a petite Russian blonde with a Smurfette voice and the energy of a Pomeranian puppy, was at the front door in 10 minutes with a Xanax and a worried look on her face. "Do not come in," I warned her. "He'll probably kill you." I gave Mystery the pill and waited until the sobs slowed to a sniffle. Then I helped him into a pair of black boots, jeans, and a gray T-shirt. He was docile now, like a big baby. "I'm taking you to get some help." I walked him outside to my old, rusty Corvette and stuffed him into the tiny front seat. "I want to learn martial arts," he said. "So when I want to kill someone, I can do something about it." I stepped on the accelerator. Our destination was the Hollywood Mental Health Center. It was an ugly slab of concrete surrounded day and night by homeless men who screamed at lampposts, transvestites who lived out of shopping carts, and other remained human beings. Mystery, I realized, was one of them. He just happened to have charisma and talent. I signed him in and we waited for a turn with one of the counselors. An hour passed. He began to fidget. 2 hours passed. His brow furrowed. His face clouded. 3 hours passed. The tears started. 4 hours passed. He bolted out of his chair and ran out through the front door of the building. I chased him across the street and caught him outside a mini-mall. I took his arm and turned him around, baby-talking him back into the waiting room. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30. He was up and out again. I ran after him. 2 social workers stood uselessly in the lobby. "Stop him!" I yelled. "We can't," one of them said. "He's left the premises." I ran out of the door and dragged him back again. The social workers led him down a long, dark hallway and into a claustrophobic cubicle. The therapist sat behind a desk, running a finger through a black tangle in her hair. She was a slim Asian woman with dark red lipstick and a pinstripe pantsuit. "So, how are you feeling today?" she asked, forcing a smile. "I'm feeling like there's no point to anything." Mystery burst into tears. "I'm listening," she said. "I can't go on," Mystery went on. She reached into a drawer, pulled out a small packet of tissues, and handed it to him. As Mystery reached for the package, he looked up and met her eyes for the first time. A flicker of animation flashed across Mystery's face, then died. "I know exactly what to say and what to do to make you attracted to me. Every rule, every step, every word. I just can't do it right now." She nodded mechanically. "Another place, another time, and I would have made you mine." "Yes," she said, "I'm sure you would have." She didn't know. How could she? But this sobbing giant was the greatest pickup artist in the world. That was not a matter of opinion, but fact. There was only one person alive who could possibly compete with him, and that man was sitting in front of her also. From a formless lump of nerd, Mystery had molded me into a superstar. Together, we had pulled off spectacular pickups before the disbelieving eyes of our disciples in Los Angeles, New York, Melbourne, Belgrade, and beyond. And now, we were in a madhouse. I am far from attractive. My nose is too large and has a bump in the ridge. Though I'm not bald, to say that my hair is thinning would be an understatement. My eyes are small, though they do have a lively glimmer, which is doomed to remain my secret because no one can see it behind my glasses. I have indentations on either side of my forehead, which I like and believe add character to my face, though I've never actually been complimented on them. I am shorter than I'd like to be, and so skinny that I look malnourished. When I look down at my pale, slouched body, I wonder why any woman would want to sleep next to it, let alone embrace it. So, for me, meeting girls takes work. I'm not the kind of guy women giggle over at a bar. I can't offer them a piece of my fame or a mansion like so many other men in Los Angeles. All I have is my mind, and nobody can see that. You may notice that I haven't mentioned my personality. This is because my personality has completely changed, or, to put it more accurately, I completely changed my personality. I invented style, my alter ego, and in the course of 2 years, style became more popular than I ever was, especially with women. It was never my intention to change my personality or walk through the world with an assumed identity. In fact, I was happy with myself and my life. That is, until an innocent phone call, it always starts with an innocent phone call, led me on a journey into one of the oddest and most exciting underground communities that, in more than a dozen years of journalism, I had ever come across. The call was from Jeremy Ruby Strauss, no relation, a book editor who had stumbled across a document on the internet called The Lay Guide, short for the How to Lay Girls Guide. Compressed into 150 sizzling pages, he said was the collected wisdom of dozens of pickup artists who had been exchanging their knowledge, secretly working to turn the art of seduction into an exact science. The information needed to be rewritten and organized into a coherent how-to book, and he thought I was the man to do it. I wasn't so sure. I want to write literature, not give advice to horny adolescents. But, of course, I told him it wouldn't hurt to take a look at it. The moment I started reading, my life changed. Not necessarily because of the information in it, but because of the path it sent me hurtling down. When I look back on my teenage years, I have one major regret: that I didn't fool around with enough girls. In college, I began to find myself, the things I was interested in, the personality I'd always been too shy to express, but I did not sleep with a single woman. After school, I took a job at the New York Times as a cultural reporter. I went on the road with Marilyn Manson and Motley Crue to write books with them. And all that time, I didn't get so much as a single kiss from anyone except Tommy Lee. After that, I pretty much gave up hope. The problem wasn't that I'd never been laid. It was that the few times I did get lucky, I'd turn a one-night stand into a 2-year stand because I didn't know when it was going to happen again. The lay guide had an acronym for people like me: AFC. I was an average, frustrated chump, not like Dustin. I met Dustin the year I graduated. He was friends with a classmate of mine named Marco, a faux aristocratic Serbian who had been my companion in girllessness since nursery school. When Marco first introduced me to him, I was unimpressed. He was short and swarthy, with long curly brown hair. That night, we went to a Chicago club called Drink. As we checked our coats, Dustin asked, "Do you know if there are any dark corners in here?" I asked him what he needed dark corners for, and he replied that they were good places to take girls. I raised my eyebrows skeptically. Minutes after entering the bar, however, he made eye contact with a shy-looking girl who was talking with a friend. Without a word, Dustin walked away. The girl followed him, straight to a dark corner. When they finished kissing and groping, they parted wordlessly. Dustin repeated this seemingly miraculous feat 4 times that night. A new world opened up before my eyes. I grilled him for hours, trying to determine what sort of magical powers he possessed. Dustin was what they call a natural. He had lost his virginity at age 11 when the 15-year-old daughter of a neighbor used him as a sexual experiment, and he had been fucking nonstop since. One night, I took him to a party on a boat. When a sultry, doe-eyed girl walked by, he turned to me and said, "She's just your type." I denied it and stared at the floor, as usual. When she walked past again, he asked her, "Do you know Niel?" I stammered out a few words until Dustin took over and rescued me. We met her and her boyfriend at a bar afterwards. They had just moved in together. Her boyfriend was taking their dog for a walk. After a few drinks, he took the dog home, leaving Paula with us. Dustin suggested going back to my place to cook a late-night snack, so we walked to my tiny East Village apartment and instead collapsed on the bed with Dustin on one side of Paula and me on the other. When Dustin started kissing her left cheek, he signaled me to do the same on her right cheek. Then, in synchronicity, we moved down her body to her neck and her breasts. Though I was surprised by Paula's quiet compliance, for Dustin this seemed to be business as usual. He turned to me and asked if I had a condom. I found one for him. He pulled off her pants and moved into her while I continued lapping uselessly at her right breast. That was Dustin's power, giving women the fantasy they never thought they'd experience. Afterward, Paula called me constantly. She wanted to talk about the experience, to rationalize it, because she couldn't believe what she had done. That's how it always worked with Dustin. He got the girl, I got the guilt. I chalked this up to a simple difference of personality. Dustin had a natural charm, and I didn't. Or at least that's what I thought until I read the lay guide and explored the websites it recommended. What I discovered was an entire community filled with Dustins, men who claimed to have found a combination to unlock a woman's heart and legs, along with thousands of others like myself, trying to learn their secrets. The difference was that these men had broken down their methods to a specific set of rules that anybody could apply. Once I'd discovered their world, the first thing that changed was my vocabulary. Terms like PUA, pickup artist, sarging, picking up women, and HB, hot babe, entered my permanent lexicon. Then, whenever I returned home from going out with a woman, I sat down at my computer and posted my questions on the news groups. What do I do if she says she has a boyfriend? If she eats garlic during dinner, does it mean she's not planning on kissing me? Is it a good or a bad sign when a girl puts on lipstick in front of me? And online characters like Candor, Gunwitch, and Formhandle began replying to my questions. The answers? Use a boyfriend-destroyer pattern? You're overanalyzing this. Neither. Soon I realized this was not just an internet phenomenon, but a way of life. In the guise of Jeremy Ruby Strauss and the internet, God had given me a second chance. It wasn't too late to be Dustin, to become what every woman wants. Not what she says she wants, but what she really wants, deep inside, where her fantasies and daydreams lie. But I couldn't do it on my own. I made it my mission to hunt down the greatest pickup artists in the world and beg for shelter under their wings. And so began the strangest 2 years of my life. Mystery was the most worshipped pickup artist in the community. His nights out seducing models and strippers in his hometown of Toronto were chronicled in intimate detail online. For 4 years, he had been offering free advice in seduction newsgroups. Then, in October, he decided to put a price on himself and posted the following. Mystery is now producing basic training workshops in several cities around the world due to numerous requests. The first workshop will be in Los Angeles from Wednesday evening, October 10 through Saturday night. The fee is $500. This includes club entry, limo for 4 evenings. Sweet, huh? An hour lecture in the limo each evening with a 30-minute debriefing at the end of the night, and finally, 3.5 hours per night in the field with Mystery. By the end of basic training, you will have approached close to 50 women. Clicking send on my email to Mystery was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. If anyone, friends, family, colleagues found out I was paying for lessons on picking up women, the mockery would be merciless. A week later, I walked into the lobby of the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. I wore a blue wool sweater that was so soft and thin it looked like cotton, black pants with laces running up the sides, and shoes that gave me a couple of extra inches in height. My pockets bulged with the supplies Mystery had instructed every student to bring: a pen, a notepad, a pack of gum, and condoms. I spotted Mystery instantly. He was seated in a Victorian armchair with a smug, I-just-bench-pressed the world smile on his face. He wore a casual blue-black suit, a small, pointed piercing wagging from his chin, and his nails were painted jet black. He wasn't necessarily attractive, but he was charismatic. Tall and thin, with long chestnut hair, high cheekbones, and a bloodless pallor. He looked like a computer geek who'd been bitten by a vampire. Next to him was a shorter, intense-looking character who introduced himself as Mystery's wing, Sin. He wore a black crew-neck shirt, and his hair was pitch black and gelled straight back. He had the complexion, however, of a man whose natural hair color was red. "What's your top score?" Sin asked as I sat down. "My top score?" "Yeah. How many girls have you been with?" Somewhere around 7. "Somewhere around 7? 6, I confessed. Sin ranked in the 60s. Mystery in the hundreds. I looked at them in wonder. They were another class of being. A second student arrived, introducing himself as Extra Mask. He was a tall, gangly, impish 26-year-old with overly baggy clothing and a handsomely chiseled face. When Sin asked him what his count was, Extra Mask scratched his head uncomfortably. "I have virtually zero experience with girls." "You're kidding," Sin said. "I've never even held a girl's hand. My parents were really strict Catholics, so I always had a lot of guilt about girls." The next arrival was a tanned, balding man in his 40s who'd flown in from Australia. He had a $10,000 Rolex and one of the ugliest sweaters I'd ever seen, a thick cable knit with multicolored zigzags that looked like the aftermath of a finger-painting mishap. He reeked of money and confidence, yet the moment he opened his mouth to give Sin his score, 5, his voice trembled. His appearance, like his sweater, was just an accident that spoke nothing of his nature. He was new to the community, so Mystery christened him Sweater. The 3 of us were the only students in the workshop. "Okay, We got a lot to talk about, Mystery and close, so the other guests in the hotel couldn't hear. My job here is to get what's in my head into yours. Think of tonight as a video game. It's not real. Every time you do an approach, you are playing this game. My heart began pounding violently. The thought of trying to start a conversation with a woman I didn't know petrified me. Mystery continued. You will feel shy sometimes and self-conscious, and you must deal with it like you deal with a pebble in your shoe. It's uncomfortable, but you ignore it. I need to teach you, in 4 days, the sequence of moves you need to win. You will have to play the game over and over, so get ready to fail. Mystery then told us his story. Since the age of 11, when he beat the secret to a card trick out of a classmate, Mystery's goal in life was to become a celebrity magician, like David Copperfield. He spent years studying and practicing and managed to parlay his talents into birthday parties, corporate gigs, and even a couple of talk shows. In the process, however, his social life suffered. At the age of 21, when he was still a virgin, he decided to do something about it. One of the world's greatest mysteries is the mind of a woman, so I set out to solve it. He took a bus ride into Toronto every day, going to bars, restaurants, and coffee shops, relying on the one skill he did know, magic. He tolerated rejection and embarrassment until, piece by piece, he discovered what he believed to be the patterns underlying all male-female relationships. The basic format is FMAC, find, meet, attract, close. Believe it or not, the game is linear. A lot of people don't know that. For the next half hour, Mystery told us about what he called group theory. You do not walk up to a girl who's all by herself. Women of beauty are rarely found alone. After approaching the group, he continued, the key is to ignore the woman you desire while winning over her friends. If the target is attractive and used to men fawning all over her, the pickup artist must intrigue her by pretending to be unaffected by her charm. This is accomplished through the use of what he called a neg. Neither compliment nor insult, a neg is something in between, an accidental insult or a backhanded compliment. The purpose of a neg is to lower a woman's self-esteem while actively displaying a lack of interest in her, by telling her she has lipstick on her teeth, for example, or offering her a piece of gum after she speaks. Mystery lectured, eyes blazing with the convictions of his aphorisms. If you don't believe me, you will see it tonight. Tonight is the night of experiments. Tomorrow, if you do what I say, you will be able to make out with the girl within 15 minutes. He looked at Extra Mask. Name the 5 characteristics of an alpha male. Confidence? Right. What else? Strength? No. Body odor? He turned to Sweater and me. We were also clueless. The number 1 characteristic of an alpha male is the smile, he said, beaming an artificial beam. Smile when you enter a room. By smiling, you look like you're together, you're fun, and you're somebody. That's just not me, Sweater said. I look silly when I smile. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always gotten. Besides confidence and a smile, we learned the other characteristics of an alpha male were being well-groomed, possessing a sense of humor, connecting with people, and being seen as the social center of a room. No one bothered to tell Mystery that those were actually 6 characteristics. What kind of girl do you want? He asked Sweater. I'm looking for a wife. She needs to be smart enough to hold up her end of any conversation and have enough beauty to turn heads when she walks into her room. Well, look at you, Mystery said. If you look average, you're going to get average girls. Your Sweater? Burn it. You need to learn peacock theory. Mystery loved theories. Peacock theory is the idea that in order to attract the most desirable female, it's necessary to stand out in a colorful way. For humans, he told us, the equivalent of the fanned peacock tail is a shiny shirt, a garish hat, and jewelry that lights up in the dark. Basically, everything I've dismissed my whole life is cheesy. When it came time for my personal critique, Mystery had a laundry list of fixes. Get rid of the glasses, shape the overgrown goatee, shave my head, get some jewelry, get a life. "I have an opener for you to use," he said to me. "Say this when you see a group with a girl you like. 'Hey, it looks like there's a party over here.' Then run to the girl you want and add, 'If I wasn't gay, you'd be so mine.'" A flash of crimson burned up my face. "Really? How's that going to help? When she's attracted to you, it won't matter whether you said you were gay or not." "But isn't that lying?" "It's not lying," he replied. "It's flirting." We piled into the limo and drove to the Standard Lounge, a velvet rope-guarded hotel hotspot. It was here that mystery shattered my model of reality. The man was a machine. The Standard was dead when we walked in. There were just two groups of people in the room, a couple near the entrance and two couples in the corner. I was ready to leave, but then I saw mystery approach the people in the corner. They were sitting on opposite couches across a glass table. The men were on one side. One of them was Scott Baio, the actor best known for playing Chachi on Happy Days. Across from him were two women, a brunette and a bleach blonde, whose cut-off white T-shirt was suspended so high by fake breasts that the bottom of it just hovered above a belly. This woman was Baio's date. She was also, I gathered, Mystery's target. He had his back turned to her and was showing something to Scott Baio and his friend. "Be careful with that," Baio was saying. "It cost $40,000. Mystery had Baio's watch in his hand. He placed it on the table. "Now," he commanded. I tensed my stomach muscles, increasing the flow of oxygen to my brain. And as Mystery waved his hands over the watch, the second hand stopped ticking. He waited 15 seconds, then waved his hands again, and slowly the watch sputtered back to life, along with Baio's heart. Mystery's audience of 4 burst into applause. "Do something else," the blonde pleaded. Mystery brushed her off with a neg. "Wow, she's so demanding. Is she always like this?" We were witnessing group theory in action. The more Mystery performed for the guys, the more the blonde clamored for attention. "I don't usually go out," Baio was telling Mystery. "I'm too old." After a few more minutes, Mystery finally acknowledged the blonde. He held his arms out. She placed her hands in his, and he began giving her a technique called cold reading, the art of telling people truisms about themselves without any prior knowledge. With each accurate sentence, the blonde's jaw dropped further open until she started asking him about his job and his psychic abilities. Every response Mystery gave was intended to accentuate his youth and enthusiasm for the good life Baio said he had outgrown. "I feel so old," he said. "How old are you?" she asked. 27. "That's not old. That's perfect." He was in. Mystery called me over and whispered in my ear. He wanted me to talk to Baio and his friends while he hit on the girl. This was my first experience as a wing, a term Mystery had taken from Top Gun, along with words like target and obstacle. I struggled to make small talk with them, but Baio cut me off. "Tell me, this is all an illusion, and he's not actually stealing my girlfriend." 10 long minutes later, Mystery stood up and put his arm around me, and we left the club. Outside, he pulled a cocktail napkin from his pocket. It contained her phone number. Mystery was the real deal. As we took the limo to the Key Club, Mystery told us the first commandment of pickup, the 3-second rule. A man has 3 seconds after spotting a woman to speak to her. If he takes any longer, then not only is the girl likely to think he's a creep who's been staring at her, but he will get nervous and probably blow it. The moment we walked into the Key Club, Mystery put the 3-second rule into action. Striding up to a group, he held out his hands and asks, "What's your first impression of these? Not the hands, the black nails." As the girls gathered round him, Sin pulled me aside and suggested attempting my first approach. A group of women walked by, and I tried to say something, but the word "hi" barely squeaked out of my throat. As they continued past, I followed and grabbed one of the girls on the shoulder. She turned around, startled, and gave me a withering look. "Never," Sin admonished me, "approach a woman from behind. Always come in from the front, but at a slight angle, so it's not confrontational. Speak to her over your shoulder, so it looks like you might walk away at any minute. Ever see Robert Redford in A Horse Whisperer? It's kind of like that." A few minutes later, I spotted a young, tipsy-looking woman with tangled blonde curls and a puffy pink vest standing alone. I circled around until I was in the 10 o'clock position and walked in, imagining myself approaching a horse. I didn't want to frighten. "Oh, my God," I said to her. Did you see those two girls fighting outside?" "No, what happened?" She was interested. She was talking to me. It was working. Two girls were fighting over this little guy who was half her size. It was pretty brutal." She giggled. We started talking. She actually seemed grateful for the conversation. Sin sidled up to me and whispered, "Isolate her." I suggested sitting down, and we walked to a bench. Sin followed and sat behind us. As I'd been taught, I asked her to tell me the qualities she finds attractive in guys. She said humor and ass. Fortunately, I have one of those qualities. Suddenly, I felt Sin's breath in my ear. "Sniff her hair." I smelled her hair, although I wasn't exactly sure what the point was. I figured Sin wanted me to nag her, so I said, "It smells like smoke." "No," Sin hissed. She seemed offended, so, to recover, I took another whiff. But underneath that, there's a very intoxicating smell. She scanned me up and down. "You're weird." Fortunately, Mystery soon arrived. "This place is dead. We're going somewhere more target-rich." I bid my new friend goodbye, as Sin had taught me, pointing to my cheek and saying, "Kiss goodbye." She actually pecked me. I felt very alpha. On the way out, as I stopped to use the bathroom, I found Extra Mask standing there, twirling an unwashed lock of hair in his fingers. "Are you waiting for the toilet?" I asked. "Sort of. Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "I have a lot of trouble peeing beside guys in urinals. Even if I'm peeing already and a guy walks up, I stop." "No one's judging you." I walked to the urinal and discharged my duties. Compared to Extra Mask, I was going to be an easy student. I was in high spirits in the limo to the next bar. "Do you think I could have kissed her?" I asked Mystery. "If you think you could have, then you could have," he said. "And what you do is you phase shift. Tell her you just notice she has beautiful skin and then start massaging her shoulders." "But how do you know it's okay?" "What I do is I look at an indicator of interest. If she asks you what your name is, that's an IOI. If she asks you if you're single, that's an IOI. If you take her hands and squeeze them and she squeezes back, that's an IOI. And as soon as I get 3 IOIs, I phase shift. It's like a computer program." "But how do you kiss her?" Sweater asked. "I just say, 'Would you like to kiss me?' And then what happens?" "One of 3 things. If she says yes, which is very rare, you kiss her. If she says maybe or hesitates, then you say, 'Let's find out,' and kiss her. And if she says no, you say, 'I didn't say you could. It just looked like you had something on your mind.'" You see, he grinned triumphantly. "It's foolproof. That is the Mystery Kiss Close." I furiously scribbled every word of the kiss close in my notebook. No one had ever told me how to kiss a girl before. It was just one of those things men were supposed to know on their own, like shaving or car repair. On the last night of the workshop, Mystery and Sin took us to a bar called the Saddle Ranch, a country-themed meat market on the Sunset Strip. As I walked towards the mechanical bull ring, feeling foolish in a red cowboy hat Mystery had insisted I wear, I saw a girl with long black hair and tan legs sticking out of a ruffled skirt. She was talking to 2 guys, bouncing around them like a cartoon character. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. "Hey, looks like the party's over here." I spoke to the guys, then turned to face the girl. I knew the next line, but I've been dreading to use it. If I wasn't gay, you'd be so mine." A huge smile spread across her face. "I like your hat," she screeched, grabbing the brim. I guess peacocking did work. "Hey now," I told her, repeating a line I had heard Mystery use earlier. "Hands off the merchandise." She responded by throwing her arms around me and telling me I was fun. Every ounce of fear evaporated with her acceptance. "How do you all know each other?" I asked. "I just met them. My name is Elanova." She curtsied clumsily. I took that as an IOI. I showed Elanova an ESP trick Mystery had taught me earlier that evening, in which I guessed a number she was thinking between 1 and 10. Hint, it's almost always 7. And she clapped her hands together gleefully. When the bar closed, Elanova and I moved outside. Every AFC we walked past gave me the thumbs up and said, "She's hot. We're idiots." They were fucking up my game. That is, if I could figure out a way to tell Eleanor I was straight. I put my arm around her. She backed away. That was definitely not an IOI. As I took a step towards her to try again, one of the guys she'd been with in the bar arrived. She flirted with him as I stood there stupidly. When she turned back to me, I told her we should hang out sometime. She agreed and we exchanged numbers. Mystery, Sin, and the boys were in the limo, watching the whole exchange go down. I climbed inside, thinking I was hot shit for number closing in front of them all. But Mystery wasn't impressed. You forced yourself on her. You let her play with you. What do you mean? I asked. Have I ever told you about cat string theory? No. Listen, when the string is dangling above its head, just out of reach, the cat goes crazy trying to get it. But as soon as you let go of the string and drop it right between the cat's paws, it just walks away. So that girl moved away from you when you put your arm around her, and you ran right back to her. You should have punished her. Turn away and talk to someone else. Let her work to get your attention back. You have to act like you are the prize. I grew silent and thought about it, slouching into the seat. Mystery turned to Sin, and they talked amongst themselves. Suddenly, Mystery broke into a wide smile and looked straight at me. You're one of us. You're gonna be a superstar. Sure, there is Ovid, who wrote The Art of Love, Don Juan, the mythical womanizer, and Casanova. But the undisputed father of modern seduction is Ross Jeffries, a tall, skinny, self-proclaimed nerd from California. Guru and social gadfly, he commands an army 60,000 horny men strong, including top government officials, intelligence officers, and cryptographers. His weapon is his voice. After years of studying, he claims to have found the technology, and make no mistake about it, that's what it is, that will turn any responsive woman into a libidinous puddle. Jeffries, who claimed to be the inspiration for Tom Cruise's character in Magnolia, calls it speed seduction. Jeffries developed speed seduction with the help of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, a fusion of hypnosis and psychology. The fundamental precept of NLP is that thoughts, feelings, and behavior can be manipulated through words and physical gestures designed to influence the subconscious. Over the years, Jeffries had either outlasted, sued, or crushed any competitor in the field of pickup. That is, until Mystery came along. Thus, the clamor online for an eyewitness account of Mystery's first workshop was overwhelming. So I obliged, posting a detailed description of my experiences. At the end of my review, I issued a call for wings in Los Angeles. I knew that in order to become a pickup artist myself, I would have to practice. The day my report hit the internet, I received an email from someone in Encino nicknamed Grimble. He wanted to sarge with me. The term evidently has its origin in the name of one of Ross Jeffries' cats, Sargy. I drove to Grimble's house the following night. All I really knew about him was that he was a college student and he liked girls. Grimble strode outside and flashed a big smile that I didn't quite trust. He didn't seem dangerous, just slippery, like a politician or a salesman or, I suppose, a seducer. He had the complexion of barley tea and wore a brown leather jacket over a silver floral print shirt. It was a quiet Tuesday night in the valley, and the only place Grimble knew to go was TGI. We walked in the door, confident, smiling. Unfortunately, no one noticed. There were two guys watching baseball on television and a group of business people at the corner table. We strutted to the balcony. As we pushed the door open, a woman appeared. "Hey," I said to her, "let me get your opinion on something." She stopped and listened. She was about 4'10", with frizzy hair and a marshmallow body, but she had a nice smile. She would be good practice. "My friend Grimble there just got a call today from the Maury Povich show, and it seems they're doing a segment on secret admirers. Evidently, someone has a little crush on him. Do you think he should go on the show or not?" "Sure," she answered. "Why not? What if his secret admirer is a man?" She laughed. Perfect. "Would you do the show?" I asked. "Probably not. Suddenly, Grimble stepped in. "So you would make me go on the show, but you wouldn't do it yourself? You're not adventurous at all, are you?" It was great to watch him work. Where I would have let the conversation wane into small talk, he was already leading her somewhere sexual. "I am," she protested. "Then prove it to me. Let's try a little exercise. It's called synesthesia." He took a step closer to her. "It will enable you to find all kinds of resources to accomplish and feel the things you want in life." She agreed and closed her eyes, but as soon as Grimble began, a stocky, red-faced jock marched up to him. "What are you doing?" "I was showing her a self-improvement exercise." "Well, that's my wife." "Go disarm the guy," Grimble hissed. I had no idea how to disarm him. "He can show you the exercise, too," I said. "I don't know what the fuck you're talking about." The guy lifted his hands and pushed me backwards. The top of my head just reached his shoulders. "Stop it," his wife turned to us. "He gets like this." "Like what?" I asked. "Violent?" "You seem like a great couple," I said. His drunken face was 2 inches from mine and yelling about ripping something. "Remind me," Grimble said as we retreated to the car, "to teach you how to handle the AMOG." The AMOG? The alpha male of the group. 4 days later, Grimble called with good news. He and his wing, two-timer, were going to meet Ross Jeffries at California Pizza Kitchen for an expedition to the Getty Museum, and I was invited. Ross wore a long wool overcoat. He was gawky with gray stubble and greasy skin. "So, what did you learn from mystery?" "Well, one of my sticking points was knowing when a girl was attracted to me. Now I know." "And how do you know?" "When I get 3 indicators of interest."
"Name them."
"Let's see. When she asks you what your name is."
"That's one."
"When you take her hands in yours and squeeze them and she squeezes back."
"That's 2.
And, I can't remember the rest right now."
"Ah, then he's not a very good teacher, is he? Case closed."
A short waitress with blue nails arrived to take our order. Ross looked at her and then winked at me.
"These are my students. I'm their guru."
"Really?
What would you say if I told you that I teach people how to use mind control to attract any person they desire?"
Get out of here."
"It's true. I can make you fall in love with any person at this table. Let me ask you something. When you're really attracted to somebody, how do you know?"
She thought for a moment. "Well, I guess I get a funny feeling in my stomach, like butterflies." Ross put his hand, palm up, in front of his stomach.
"Yeah, and I bet that the more attracted you become, the more these butterflies rise up from your stomach."
He began slowly raising his hand to the level of his heart
"until your face begins to flush like it is right now."
Two-timer leaned over and whispered,
"That's anchoring. It's when you associate a feeling with a touch or a gesture. Now, every time Ross raises his hand like that, she gets attracted to him."
After a few more minutes of Ross's flirtatious hypno-speak, the waitress's eyes began to glaze over.
"With your boyfriend, were you attracted right away?"
he snapped, freeing her from a trance.
"Or did it take time?"
"Well, we broke up," she said. "But it took a while. We were friends at first."
"Isn't it so much better, though, when you just feel that sense of attraction?"
He moved his hand up like an elevator,
and her eyes began to glaze again. "Right away from someone?"
He pointed to himself.
"It's incredible, isn't it?"
"Yes," she agreed.
"What was wrong with your boyfriend?"
"He was too immature."
"Well, you should date more mature men."
"I was just thinking that about you as we were talking," she giggled. "It's strange. You're not my usual type." Ross suggested they get together for coffee when she wasn't working, and she jumped at the opportunity to give him her phone number. We pressed into Ross's Saab and headed to the Getty.
"Darwin talked about survival of the fittest," Two-Timer explained to me as we walked through the collection of pre-20th century art. "But strength doesn't help one get ahead in society today. We stand at the gate of a new era, the survival of the smoothest." I liked the idea, though for me, survival was going to take work. At the end of the day, Ross had 3 numbers. Two-Timer and Grimble had 2 each, and I had nothing. "Listen," Ross said, "I have a seminar coming up in a few months, and I will let you sit in and take it for free." "Thanks," I said. "I am going to be your guru, not Mystery. You'll see what I'm teaching is 100 times more powerful." I wasn't sure how to respond. "And one more thing," Ross said. "In exchange, I want you to take me to 6 Hollywood parties with super hot babes. Do we have a deal?" He rubbed his thumb on his chin. I was sure he was anchoring me. Though Mystery had flown back to Toronto after the workshop, I stayed in touch with Sin. I'd watch as a woman came over to his house for the first time, and he'd throw her against the wall by her neck, then release her just before he kissed her, shooting her adrenaline level through the roof with equal parts fear and arousal. Then he'd cook her dinner and never speak a word about it until dessert, when he'd stare at her like a tiger, eyeing its prey and say, "You don't even want to know the things I'm thinking of doing to you right now." That was generally the point when I'd excuse myself to go home. Along with the sneakier Grimble, the more predatory Sin became a faithful wing, but our friendship didn't last long. One afternoon, Sin informed me that he'd enrolled in the Air Force as an officer. "The military is a steady paycheck, and I've been an unemployed computer programmer for too long. Mystery wants to schedule his next workshop in December. Since I'm not going to be around to wing him, he wants you to do it." I tried to control the excitement in my voice. "I think I'll be free." There was just one small problem. I wasn't going to be free. I'd booked a flight to Belgrade to visit Marco, the schoolmate who had introduced me to Dustin and his natural ways. There had to be a solution. I called Mystery in Toronto, where he was living with his parents and his sister. "Hey, buddy," Mystery said, "I'm bored out of my mind here." "Can't you go out with Patricia?" I asked. Patricia was Mystery's girlfriend. "She's mad at me." Mystery had met Patricia 4 years ago, when she was fresh off the boat from Romania. He tried to mold her into his ideal girl, but she drew the line at bisexuality. For Mystery, this was a deal-breaker. He sighed. "I want to schedule a bunch of workshops. I got people interested in Miami, Chicago, and New York." "How about Belgrade?" "What? Isn't there a war going on there?" "No, the war's over, and I have to visit an old friend. Slavic women are supposed to be the most beautiful in the world." "Done." "Great, but wait," he said. "What?" "If you're going to be my wing, you can't be Niel Strauss. Think about it. Niel Strauss, writer? That isn't cool. Nobody wants to sleep with a writer." "Hold on a minute." I heard him rustling through some papers. "Listen, these are my personal development goals. I want to raise the money for a touring illusion show. I want to levitate over Niagara Falls. I want an airplane, a personal assistant, a stylist. And I want to act in Jesus Christ Superstar as Jesus." "You never got much love as a child, did you?" "No, but you need a seduction name." He paused. "Styles? How about style? That's the one thing I prided myself on. I may never have been socially comfortable, but at least I knew how to dress better than those who were." "Style it is. Mystery and Style." Yes, it had a nice ring. Style, the pickup artist, teaching lovable losers how to meet the woman of their dreams. But as soon as I hung up, I realized something. First, Style needed to teach himself. I needed to become confident, to become interesting, to become decisive, to become graceful, to become the alpha male I was never raised to be. I bought books on body language. I read anthologies of women's sexual fantasies, on marketing, levitation, mind reading, and handwriting analysis. I neglected my work, my friends, and my family. I rented Rebel Without a Cause and A Streetcar Named Desire to practice the poses of James Dean and Marlon Brando. I studied Tom Cruise and Top Gun. I wore stylish jackets with bright shirts. I bought rings, fake piercings, and experimented with cowboy hats. As I drove my car to Westwood, home to UCLA, for my first attempt at sergeing during the daytime, I was petrified. As I walked past an office depot, I saw a woman with brown glasses and short blonde hair that danced on her shoulders. She was thin, with jeans that were just tight enough and a beautiful complexion like burned butter. She walked into the store, and I decided to move on. But then I saw her again through the window. She looked like a cool intellectual, someone I could talk with about Tarkovsky movies and then take to a monster truck rally. I knew that if I didn't approach her, I'd chastise myself afterwards. Besides, she probably wasn't that good looking up close anyway. I walked into the store and found her looking at mailing envelopes. Hey, maybe you can help me settle a debate I'm having. As I recited the Mari Povich opener, I noticed that she was even more beautiful at close range. I had stumbled across a genuine 10, and I had to follow protocol and neg her. I know this is wrong to say, I blurted, but I grew up on Bugs Bunny cartoons, and you have the most adorable Bugs Bunny overbite. I was worried I'd gone too far, but she actually grinned. After all those years of braces, my mom's gonna be mad. She was flirting back with me. I performed the ESP routine, and fortunately, she picked 7. She was amazed. I asked her what she did for work, and she said she was a model. The longer we talked, the more she seemed to enjoy the conversation. But as I noticed the material working, I became nervous. I couldn't believe that a woman who looked like this was into me. I couldn't go on. I'm late for an appointment, I told her. But what steps can we take to continue this conversation? This was Mystery's number close routine. A pickup artist never gives a girl his phone number because she might not call. A PUA must make a woman comfortable enough to give him her number. He must also avoid asking for it directly because she could always say no. I could give you my number. I couldn't believe it. I don't go out much, though. Maybe she was already having regrets. When I returned home, I pulled a scrap of paper out of my pocket. Since she was a model, I wanted to look for a picture of her online. Delene Curtis. I typed the words into Google, and nearly 100,000 results came up. I had just number closed the reigning Playmate of the Year. I sat in front of my phone and stared at Darlene Curtis's number every evening, but I couldn't bring myself to call. I wasn't confident and good-looking enough for this perfect specimen of femininity. There's a word for this. Unworthiness. I felt unworthy. So I never called. My first legitimate success didn't come until a week later. Extra Mask from Mystery's workshop dropped by my apartment one Monday night. He was very excited. I can pee beside people now, so the stuff I learned in Mystery's workshop isn't just for chicks. That's true. It's for pissing, too. We drove to La Salsa for burritos. At a nearby table, there was an attractive but slightly unkempt woman. She had long, curly brown hair, tiny ferret-like features, and immense breasts that refused to be concealed by her sweatshirt. I've been taking a course in handwriting analysis, I told her. While we're waiting for our food, do you mind if I practice on you? She looked at me skeptically, but then decided I was harmless. I handed her my notebook and told her to write a sentence in it. Interesting, I said. Your handwriting has no slant. It's straight up and down, which means you're a self-sufficient person and don't always need to be around others to feel good about yourself. I made sure she was nodding in agreement and then continued. You don't have a great organizational system to your handwriting, which means that in general, you're not good at sticking to a schedule. With each tidbit I told her, she leaned in closer and nodded her head more vigorously. She had a wonderful smile. She just finished a comedy class nearby, she said, and was spending the night at a hotel, so I offered to drive her there. As I dropped her off, I pointed to my cheek and said, "Kiss goodbye." She kissed my cheek. Extra Mask kicked the back of my seat excitedly. Then I told her I had work to do, but I'd call her for a drink when I was finished. We went to a dive bar. I was on an actual date with a woman I'd picked up. Finally, I had an opportunity to experiment with more advanced material. There's a way, I told her, that you can bring better focus to your goals in your life. What is that? It's a visualization exercise. Try to remember the last time you felt happiness or pleasure. As you feel it now, where in your body are those feelings? She pointed to the center of her chest. And how good does it feel on a scale of 1 to 10? 7? Okay, now as you focus in on this feeling, notice that you can begin to see a color flowing from this feeling. What is the color? Purple, she said as she closed her eyes. Good. Now, with each breath you take, I want you to let the purple grow just a little bit brighter. Her body began to relax. I could see her chest rise and fall through her sweater. I was doing it now, evoking a response like the one I'd seen Ross Jeffries get at California Pizza Kitchen. I continued making the color expand and growing in intensity as she fell deeper into trance. How do you feel now on a scale of 1 to 10? I asked. 10. I guess it was working. Then I had her shrink the color to a tiny purple pea that contained all the power and intensity of the pleasure she was feeling. I had her place the imaginary pea in my hand. Then I traced my hand all along her body, first at a distance and then lightly touching it. To be honest, I felt not only a little stupid, but also lecherous, using the pretext of hypnosis to touch her. I stopped and asked her what she thought. Felt good, she said, and smiled her ferret smile. I drove her back to her hotel and followed her to her room. I was too scared to say a word, afraid she might suddenly turn on me and ask, "Why are you following me?" But she seemed to have mentally consented. After all that practice, I was finally getting results. She opened the door of her room and sat on the foot of the bed, just like in the movies, and pulled off her shoes. First the left, then the right. She was wearing white socks, which I found rather endearing. Then she collapsed backwards. I took a step toward her, preparing to fall on her in an embrace. But suddenly, the foulest smell I have ever encountered assailed my nostrils. I looked at her, laying on the bed, wanton, oblivious. It was her feet. Her feet were stinking up the room. I had to get out of there. Mystery and I were in Belgrade at probably the worst time of the year. Ice and slush lay heavy on the streets as Marco drove us to his apartment in a silver 1987 Mercedes that had a habit of stalling every time he put it into second gear. Mystery, hair unwashed and held back in a greasy ponytail, fumbled through his backpack, producing a long black overcoat. He had cut away the bottom third of the coat and sewn in its place black fabric covered with stars. His greatest illusion was transforming himself into a good-looking player every night he went out. "You're going to have to shave your head," he said as he looked at me. "No, thanks. What if I have weird marks on my head?" "Look at you. You're wearing glasses because your vision sucks. You have a hat on to cover your huge bald spot. You're ghostly white. You're style, so start being style." He turned to Marco. "Is there a barber shop around here?" Unfortunately, there was. Mystery sat me in a chair and told Marco to make sure the barber shaved down to the skull. Balding is not a choice, but bald is a choice. If anyone asks you why your head is shaved, tell them, "I used to have it down past my ass, but then I realized I was covering up my best feature." When the barber finished, I looked in the mirror and saw a chemo patient staring back at me. "Looks good," Mystery said. "Let's see if there's a tanning salon around here. We'll have you looking like a thug in no time." My first thought once I was shaven-headed and tan was, what took me so long? Marco looked as if he could use a makeover. 6'3", with the out-of-proportion head of a Peanuts character, he hadn't dated a single woman since he'd moved to Belgrade. But a few months ago, he met a girl named Goka, and he was sure she was the one. He bought her flowers, treated her to dinner, and dropped her off at home afterwards, like a perfect gentleman. "Have you slept with her yet?" I asked him. "No, I haven't even kissed her." "Dude, you're behaving like a total AFC. One day, a guy's gonna walk up to her in a club and say, 'Do you think magic spells work?' and take her home. She wants an adventure. She wants to have sex. All girls do." "Well," Marco said, "she's different from all those girls." The PUAs have a name for this. They call it one-itis. It's a disease AFCs get. They become obsessed with a girl they're not sleeping with and then start acting so needy and nervous around her that they end up driving her away. The cure for one-itis is to go out and have sex with a dozen other girls and then see if this flower is still so special. I had neglected to tell Mystery that his standard workshop fee was half the annual salary of the average Serbian. so most of our students were from out of the country. They met us at Ben Akiba, a lounge just off the Central Square in Belgrade. Exotic Option was an American who had taken a train from Florence, Jerry was a ski instructor from Munich, and Sasha was a local who'd been studying in Austria. Exotic Option was cool. In fact, he was trying so hard to be cool that it was going to work against him. Jerry had a great sense of humor, but came off on first impressions as boring. And Sasha, well, he looked like a big baby goose with acne. The teaching portion of the workshop was easy. All I had to do was keep Mystery on track. The challenge was going to be the demonstration part. At the bar, I noticed a delicate black-haired girl and a tall blonde with Bo Derek braids. "Go into the 2-set over there," I instructed Sasha. "Tell them you're showing some friends from America around and want suggestions for good clubs to take them to." It was a crash-and-burn mission. Sasha meekly approached them from behind and tried several times to get them to notice him. Once he had their attention, it was a struggle for him to keep it. Whenever he opened his mouth, the message was clear. I was built to be ignored. "Go in," Mystery said to me. "What?" "Go in, show the boys how it's done." Even after all my training, I was terrified. Mystery calls it dynamic social homeostasis. We were constantly buffeted about by, on one hand, our overwhelming desire to have sex with a girl, and, on the other, the need to protect ourselves when approaching. The reason this fear exists, he says, is because we are wired evolutionarily for a tribal existence, where everyone in the community knows when a man is rejected by a woman. He is then ostracized, and his genes, as Mystery puts it, are unapologetically weeded out of existence. As I approached, I tried to rationally assess the situation. Both women were facing the bar, and Sasha had approached from behind. So they had to turn around to respond, but if they wanted to get rid of him, all they had to do was turn back towards the bar. I came in from the left side of the bar, next to the black-haired girl, the obstacle, as Mystery would say. "Hi," I rasped. "I'm the friend Sasha was telling you about, so what clubs did you recommend?" I could sense a silent sigh of relief from all parties. "Well, Reka is a fun place for dinner," the black-haired girl said. "Hey, as we're talking, I want to get your opinion on something. Do you think spells work?" By now, I was getting used to telling the spells opener, a story about a friend who fell in love with a woman after she surreptitiously cast an attraction spell on him. So while my mouth moved, my brain thought strategy. I said, "I'm asking because I had an amazing experience recently. Here," I addressed the blonde, "let me show you something." I maneuvered myself around so that I was next to my target. Now that I was one-on-one with her, I still needed to sit down, otherwise she'd eventually get uncomfortable with me lurking over her. "Give me your hands," I told her, "and stand up for a moment." As soon as she stood, I wheeled around behind her and slid into her seat. Now I was finally in the set, and she was lurking on the outside. This was the science of approaching, perfectly executed, like a good game of chess. "I just stole your chair," I laughed. She smiled and punched me in the arm. The game had begun. "I was just kidding," I continued. "We'll try an ESP experiment, but I can only stay for a moment, then you can have your chair back." Even though I guessed her number wrong, it was 10, she still enjoyed the process. And I truly enjoyed listening to this girl. She was captivating and had an MBA. When it came time to leave, I told her it would be great to see her again before I left. She pulled a pen from her purse and gave me her phone number. I could feel Mystery's approval and the student's acceptance. Style was the real deal. Sasha was still talking to the black-haired girl, so I whispered in his ear, "Tell her we have to go and ask her for her email." He did, and lo and behold, she gave it to him. We rejoined the group and left the cafe. Sasha, flushed with excitement, skipped down the street like a little boy, singing in Serbian. He was being, in his own awkward way, himself. "I'm so happy," he raved. "This is the best day of my life." After Mystery and I flew home, I received a phone call from Ross Jeffries. "I'm having a workshop this weekend. If you want, you can come and sit in for free. It's at the Marina Beach Marriott Hotel." "Sure," I told him, "I'd love to." "There's just one thing. You owe me parties, good Hollywood parties with hot chicks." "Got it." I arrived on Saturday afternoon to find rows of men sat behind tables. Some were greasy-headed students, others were greasy-headed adults. In the front was our porous, bony guru, talking into a headset. He noticed me sitting in the back row. "Brothers, this is style." I smiled wanly. "He has seen what mystery has to offer and decided to become my disciple. Isn't that right, Style?" Every greasy head in the room turned to look at me. The reviews of Mystery's Belgrade workshop had hit the internet, and my skills in the field had been soundly praised. I stared at the thin black headset coiling around his face like a spider. "Something like that." That was not enough for him. "Who is your guru?" It was his room, but it was my mind. "I'll get back to you on that." I could see that he wasn't happy. After all, this wasn't just a seminar he was running. It was a cult. When the meeting broke for lunch, Ross pulled me aside. "I wasn't aware that you were still a supporter of Mystery. I thought you had come over to the good side." "I don't think your two methods have to be mutually exclusive. I told Mystery what you did with the waitress, and he flipped out. He saw how speed seduction could really be effective." Ross's face turned purple. "Stop! You're being led into the inner sanctum of power, my young apprentice, and the price of betrayal is dark beyond measure." Ross's severity, though unconscionable, was understandable. He had built the seduction community almost single-handedly. Worse than Mystery, in his mind, was a former speed seduction student named David D'Angelo. D'Angelo had set up a rival business called Double Your Dating. It was based not on any form of hypnosis, but rather on evolutionary psychology and D'Angelo's principle of cocky fun. "You know my cheapjack imitator, David the Anus Hole, is having his first seminar in L.A., Ross said. "The guy is so fucking good-looking and well-connected, it just astounds me that people think he could ever understand their difficulties in dealing with women." I made a mental note to sign up for the seminar. Attraction is not a choice. Those were the words David D'Angelo had projected on the wall. The seminar was packed. Many of the people I recognized, including Extra Mask. It was getting to be an all-too-familiar sight. A person on stage instructing a group of needy men on how to save themselves from nightly onanism. But there was a difference. D'Angelo was a good-looking guy. He didn't have the crazy gleam of a wannabe cult leader or some gaping hole in his soul that he was trying to fill with women. "Seduction," he read from his notes, "is defined in the dictionary as an enticement to wrongdoing. In other words, seduction implies being dishonest. That is not what I'm teaching. I'm teaching something called attraction. How do you make someone want something? You give it value. You show that others like it. You make it scarce, and you make them work for it." The highlight of the seminar was an appearance by two people who would give me my much-coveted inner game, and more. Steve P. and Rasputin. Wearing a leather vest and an Indiana Jones hat, Steve P. was equal parts Hell's Angel and Native American shaman. Rasputin was a strip club bouncer with mutton-chop sideburns who looked like a steroid Jack Wolverine. Their advice in seducing women was simple: become an expert in how to feel good. Steve P. trained women to have orgasms from a single vocal command, and, more fantastically, he claimed to give hypnotic breast enlargements. Rasputin's forte was what he called hypnotic sexual engineering. Sex, he explained, must be viewed as a privilege for the woman, not a favor to you. "If a woman wants to give me a blowjob, I tell her you only get 3 sucks. Afterwards, I tell her, didn't that feel nice? Next time, you get 5 sucks. "You have to live in your own reality," Steve P. cut in. "I had a girl once tell me I was kind of pudgy. I said, well, if that's what you think, you don't get to pat the Buddha belly or ride the jade stalk." Afterwards, D'Angelo introduced me to the pair. "I'd love to learn more about what you do," I said. Steve B. scanned my face. "A guy named Phoenix offered to pay me $2,000 to follow me around for 3 days, and I told him no because he wants to make women his slaves. You seem like you may care about women. Here's my card. Call me if you ever want to learn some inner circle shit. So began the weirdest phase of my education. Every weekend, I'd drive south to San Diego and stay at Steve P.'s small, squalid apartment, where he raised 2 sons the same way he talked to his students, with compassionate obscenity. In the afternoon, Steve and I drove to see Rasputin. At each session, they'd put me under, and Rasputin would tell complex metaphorical stories in one of my ears as Steve P. issued commands to my subconscious in the other. Afterward, I'd go back to Steve's house and read his NLP books while he screamed lovingly at his kids. After they went to sleep, he gave me a lesson in soul-gazing, which is when you look deep into a woman's right eye with your own right eye as you breathe together. Once you do this with her, she's going to bond real strong with you, he warned. Finally, he shared what he considered to be his greatest skill, guiding any woman through words and touch to a powerful orgasm that gushes like Niagara Falls. It was a whirlwind of learning. I didn't call my friends. I barely talked to my family. I turned down every writing assignment that came my way. I told Rasputin, Steve said one night, that I'd like you to become one of our trainers. It was an offer I'd have to turn down. I had hundreds of openers, routines, cocky, funny comments, ways to demonstrate value, and powerful sexual techniques. I needed to be in the field, approaching, calibrating, fine-tuning, and working through sticking points. I made a promise to myself. If I ever meet a guru again, it would not be as a student, but as an equal. As Mystery and I traveled the world doing workshops, the posers and the keyboard jockeys were outed, and the superstars were given their due. And Mystery and I were the superstars because we delivered. The game was consuming my old life, but it was part of the process of becoming that guy in the club, the one I'd always envied, the one in the corner making out with the girl he'd just met, the Dustin. Before I discovered the community, the only time I'd ever made out with a girl I met in a club was when I first arrived in Los Angeles. But in the middle of kissing, she pulled away and said, "Everyone must think you're a producer or something." The subtext was that she was otherwise too hot to be making out with a slob like me. It shattered me for months. But now, when I walked into a club, I felt a rush of power, wondering which woman would have her tongue down my throat within half an hour. My reputation stemmed largely from the Miami workshop, where in a period of 30 minutes I put my previous 6 weeks of training into action. It was a night that would go down in the annals of community history. It was seduction, not as wrestling, but as ballet. When they walked into the VIP area of Miami's Crowbar, everyone noticed. They were both platinum blondes with well-tanned fake breasts and identical outfits, tight white tank tops and tight white pants. They were perfect 10s, and they were dressed to turn men into beasts. I had to suppress every evolutionary instinct and pay them no attention whatsoever. With me were Mystery and 2 of our students, Outbreak and the Matador of Love. Outbreak went in first, complimenting the Platinum twins on their outfits. They brushed him off like a gnat. Next, the Matador of Love moved in with the Maripovich opener. He too crashed and burned. Now it was my turn. This was going to take every bit of self-esteem that Steve P. and Rasputin had hypnotized into me. "That tall one isn't a 10, Mystery leaned in and whispered to me. "She's an 11. This is going to take some hardcore negging." The girls strode to the bar, where they began talking to a transvestite in a black tutu. I moved in, not even glancing at them, and greeted the transvestite as if I knew him. Now that I was in range, it was time to neg. "That girl over there is biting your style," I said to the 10. "Look at her." I pointed to another platinum blonde in a white outfit. "She's just got the same hair," the 10 replied dismissively. "No, look at her outfit," I persisted. "It's almost exactly the same." They looked over. If I didn't come up with something good to follow, I'd be branded just another weirdo. "You know what?" I told them. "You both look like strange little snowflakes." It was a bizarre comment, but now I had their attention. I continued, "I have to ask you something. Is your hair real?" The 10 looked shocked. "Yes. Feel it." I pulled it gently. "Hey, it moved. Pull harder." I complied and yanked it so hard that her neck jerked back. Okay, I said, I believe you. But how about your friend there? The 11's face reddened. This is really rude. What if I'm bald underneath here? That could really hurt someone's feelings. How would you feel if someone said that to you? The pickup is a high-stakes game, but if I could turn her anger around, I'd be in. Fortunately, I happened to be trying to make a point to the students and was wearing a black mod wig just to show that looks don't matter. It's all game. I leaned over the bar and stared the 11 down. Well, actually, I am wearing a wig and I'm bald underneath here. She looked at me. She didn't know how to respond, and I'll tell you something else. Whether I go out totally bald or in some crazy long-haired wig, it doesn't change the way I'm treated by people. Beauty is common. It's something you're born with or you pay for. What counts is what you make of yourself, a great outlook and a great personality. The girls were dumbstruck. I had entered their world, as Jeffries once put it, and demonstrated authority over it. And to ensure my position there, I threw in one more neg, but softened with a slight compliment. And you know what? You have a great smile. I can tell that underneath all that, you're probably a good person. The 10 sidled up to me and said, "We're sisters." A lesser pickup artist would have thought that he had won them over, but no, this was just one more shit test. I looked very slowly at both of them and then took a chance. Bullshit. I bet a lot of guys believe you, but I'm a very intuitive person. When I look at you both, I can tell you're very different, too different. The 10 broke into a guilty smile. We never told anyone this, but you're right, we're just friends. I took another chance, and I'd be willing to bet that you haven't even been friends for that long. Usually, best friends start to have the same mannerisms, and you two don't. We've only known each other a year, the 10 admitted. Now it was time to back off my game and fluff a little. The 10 told me they were from San Diego. As we talked, I kept my back to the 11, as if I were less interested in her. This was classic mystery method. I wanted her thinking more about me, wondering why I wasn't giving her the attention she was used to. I think of a woman's interest in me as a fire, and when it starts to die out, it's time to stoke it. So, just when the 11 was about to walk away, I turned around and delivered a beautiful line. You know what? When I look at you, I can see exactly what you looked like in middle school. And I'm willing to bet you weren't so outgoing or popular then. Sure, it was a truism, but she stared at me flabbergasted. To seal the victory, I laid out one last beauty-neutralizing cold reading routine. I bet a lot of people think you're a bitch, but you're actually shy in a lot of ways. She began to give me the doggy dinner bowl look, as the PUAs call it. Her eyes glazed over, her pupils dilated, and she just watched my lips move, entranced and attractive. "You're interesting," the 10 leaned in and gave me a tight hug. "Hey, that'll be $30, I told her, disentangling myself. "This shit ain't free." "I love him," she told her friend. Then she asked if they could stay with me next time they were in L.A. "Sure," I said. But as the words left my mouth, I realized that I should have made my hospitality more of a challenge. There's so much to remember and juggle during a pickup that it's hard to get everything perfect. But no matter. She gave me her phone number, and I gave her mine. As we exchanged them, I learned that the 10 was Rebecca and the 11 was Heather. Now it was time to separate the two of them and see if I could get enough IOIs to kiss-close Heather. A guy they knew suddenly showed up and bought 3 shots for Heather, Rebecca, and himself. I held out my empty hand and looked around, pretending to be hurt. Heather took the bait. "Don't mind him," she said. "He's just rude." As she called the bartender over and ordered me a shot, Rebecca threw her a dirty look. "Remember our rule." I knew what the rule was. Girls like this love it when guys buy them drinks. But a true pickup artist knows never to buy meals, drinks, or gifts for a girl he hasn't slept with. Dating is for tools. "But you're not buying a drink for yourself," I told him. "You're buying one for me." Suddenly, Mystery walked towards me and whispered in my ear, "Isolate. I want to show you something." I took Heather by the hand, led her to a nearby booth, and performed the ESP experiment. I told her about soul-gazing, and, with house music and dozens of conversations blaring around us, we stared into each other's eyes and shared a moment together. I slowly moved my head towards hers. "No lips," she said quietly. I held up my index finger and placed it against her lips and said, "Shh." Then I kissed her. We made out carefully, and then I returned her to Rebecca at the bar. I told them it was a pleasure meeting them and I should rejoin my friends. For the rest of the night, I was on fire. Women who hadn't even seen me with the Platinum Non-Sisters were opening me. They could smell it. When I ran into Heather again, I asked her, "You're not a thief, are you?" "No." I removed my necklace and very slowly put it around her neck. "This is still mine," I whispered, kissing her lightly. "It's something to remember tonight by, but I want it back next time I see you. It's very special to me." As I walked away, I knew I just made her night. It didn't even matter whether I got laid or not. After 2 months of workshops, I flew back to Los Angeles for a break, but I grew restless. The compulsion to Sarge consumed my body like a fever. Fortunately, I received a call from Grimble. He was at the whiskey bar talking to Heidi Fleiss, the former Hollywood madam. She wanted to meet me. I slipped into a custom-made suit. I had a feeling this was not a casual call. When I arrived, Grimble was standing next to her at the bar. Heidi reached out and shook my hand firmly. "Grimble here says you're a pickup artist. Let's see what you've got." I flashed Grimble a dirty look. "Why don't you show her?" "I have a girl here," he said, nodding to a petite Hispanic woman in 4-inch heels. "Well," Heidi prodded, "go pick up a girl. I bet I can get anyone you can." She spun around and approached 3 girls sitting on a patio. The battle had begun. I opened a nearby 3-set, 2 men and a lady who looked like an anchorwoman in search of a camera. "How do you all know each other?" Unfortunately, she was married to one of the guys. Just as I was about to eject, Heidi marched in. "So," she asked my former target, "how do you know Style?" "We just met him," she said. As we left, I asked her how her 3-set had gone. "The girls were all 20. I could have turned them out in half an hour." Evidently, pickup to Heidi Fleiss meant recruiting girls as escorts. Minutes later, she was in another group. I decided it was time to humble her with the awesome power of my newfound game. She was kneeling on the ground in front of 2 women with gold glitter dusting their cheeks, talking about local restaurants. I walked in with a new opinion opener I had made up about a friend whose new girlfriend won't let him talk to his ex-girlfriend from college. Is she being fair, I asked, or is she being too possessive? The point was to get the glitter girls talking amongst themselves, but Heidi blurted, "The guy should just fuck both girls. I mean, I always put out on the first night." It was time to demonstrate value and blow Heidi out. I ran a piece I'd invented after meeting the fake sisters, the best friends test. "I have to ask you guys, how long have you known each other?" "About 6 years, one of the girls said. I could totally tell. "How?" "Rather than explain, I'll give you 2 the best friends test." The girls leaned in towards me, thrilled by the idea. Guys in the community have an expression for this phenomena: chick crack. Most women respond to routines involving tests, psychological games, fortune-telling, and cold reading like addicts respond to free drugs. "Okay," I said. The girls huddled in closer. "Do you both use the same shampoo?" They looked at each other to decide on an answer, then turned to me and opened their mouths to speak. I cut them off. "You already passed." "But we don't use the same shampoo," one of the girls said. You both looked at each other before you answered. When 2 people have a connection, they look at each other first and communicate almost telepathically before answering. The 2 girls looked at each other again. "See," I exclaimed, "you're doing it right now." They burst out laughing. Big points for Style. But Heidi was no quitter. "So," she announced, "are any of you girls going to fuck him?" Ouch. In 1 sentence, she had humiliated me. Of course, none of the girls wanted to fuck me. Not yet. I hadn't even made it halfway through my sequence, and even if I had, the comments still would have blown me out. "Hey, I'm not that easy," I responded, a little late. "I need trust, comfort, and connection first." Heidi and I walked away together. She clapped a hand on my shoulder. If I left here right now, they'd follow me out like a line of ducks. By the time we left the bar that night, I'd learned that there's a fine line between pimp and player. When I came home, Dustin was waiting in my apartment. The king of the naturals had returned. He was wearing a tweed sports coat, straight-leg polyester slacks, and a black skull cap. I hadn't talked to Dustin since before I joined the community. Last I'd heard, he was managing a nightclub in Russia. How did you get in here? Your landlady, Louise, let me in. She's a really sweet person. Her son's a writer, too, you know. It's good to see you. He gave me a big bear hug. When he pulled away, his eyes were misty, as if it really were good to see me again. The feeling was mutual. Dustin was a blank male canvas for a woman to project her repressed desires onto. Now, with my new knowledge, I could watch him work, ask questions, and eventually model his process. I don't know if I told you what I've been doing this past year, I said, but my whole life has changed. I know. Marco told me. He looked at me with big, wet, brown eyes, the ones that had gazed into the souls of countless beautiful women. He paused. I don't really do that anymore. I looked at him incredulously, but then I noticed that the skullcap on his head was a yarmulke. I live in Jerusalem now, in a yeshiva. You're kidding. No, I haven't had sex for 8 months. It's not allowed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you allowed to masturbate? No. Really? Well, sometimes I have wet dreams. See, God is trying to tell you something. It has to come out. He laughed and patted me on the back. His gestures were slow and his laugh was condescending, as if he had spiritually bypassed toilet humor. I go by my Hebrew name now, Avisha. I was stunned. How could Dustin transform so suddenly from nightclub player to rabbinical student, especially now that I needed him most? So, what made you give up women? After a while, I'd bring girls home, and I didn't want to have sex with them. I just wanted to talk. So we'd talk all night and bond on a very deep level. That's when I started to leave it behind. I realized that I got my entire validation from women. Women became like gods to me, but false gods, so I went to find the real God. I stopped by, he said, to ask your forgiveness for some of my past actions. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had idealized a lifestyle that was corrupt, he explained. I abhorred kindness, mercy, human dignity, and intimacy. I dragged you into this whole pickup thing, so to whatever extent I am guilty of affecting the natural goodness of your soul, I am deeply sorry. It all made sense intellectually, but I've never trusted extremes, whether it be drug addiction, religious fanaticism, or zero-carb diets. Dustin had a hole he was trying to fill, first with women, now with religion. I accept your apology, I told him, but with the caveat that you have nothing to apologize for. I'm not just more successful with women now, I'm more successful in every other interaction, from dealing with my landlord to handling credit card overcharges. Well, he said, yes, what? I am eternally here for you as a true friend, and also to make up for what I did. Fuck him, I was going to take a nap. Mind if I stay over for a couple of days? No problem, but I'm leaving for Australia on Wednesday. Do you have an alarm clock I can borrow? I need to pray with the sunrise. After I found him a small travel clock, he reached into his bag. Here, I brought this for you. It was an 18th century book called The Path of the Just, with a note he had written for me on the title page. It quoted the Talmud. Whoever destroys a single life is as guilty as though he had destroyed the entire world, and whoever rescues a single life earns as much merit as though he had rescued the entire world. So, he was trying to save me. Why? I was having fun. Mystery and I were on another road trip. The sun was blazing, the map was accurate, and there was a surfboard strapped to the top of the car. We had 5 workshops sold out in 3 cities in Australia. Life was good, at least for me. Mystery was in low spirits. Before he left Toronto, his girlfriend, Patricia, had given him an ultimatum. Marriage and children, or goodbye. I do not understand women, he complained. I mean, I know exactly what to do to attract them, but I still don't understand them. We'd come to Australia because Sweater, the Australian student from Mystery's first workshop, had invited us to stay with him in Brisbane. After 4 months of sarging, he had finally met the woman he wanted to marry. I'm like a smitten teenager, Sweater looked nothing like the insecure, middle-aged man I had met in the Roosevelt Hotel. He was tan, healthy, and a welcoming smile was now plastered to his face. "I just spent a week in Sydney with my girlfriend," he said, walking us into the house. "We talk on the phone about 7 times a day, and on top of that, I made $500,000 this week on a real estate seminar. So thanks to the community, I have health, fun, money, and love." Sweater's place was an airy bachelor pad overlooking Brisbane River. On the ground floor, 4 employees, all fresh-faced Australian boys, sat at a large, horseshoe-shaped desk, each working on his own computer. Sweater had not only trained each of them to sell his products, books, and courses on real estate investing, but he turned them on to the seduction community as well. By day, they made Sweater money. By night, they went sarging with him. "I'm still having fun helping the guys here get girls, but I'm off the market," Sweater said. "I'm getting out at the top. I've come to understand that without commitment, you cannot have depth in anything, whether it's a relationship, a business, or a hobby." In many ways, I was jealous. I hadn't met any women yet I could say that about. Mystery was even more blown away than I was by Sweater. "I want this," he kept telling me. As we drove to the airport, Mystery and I plotted our next adventure. "I have a one-on-one workshop booked in Toronto next month," he said. "The guy is paying me $1,500. "How'd he get the money?" "His dad's rich. He just started posting online under the name Papa." Mystery had recently gotten his own place in Toronto. Patricia had broken up with him for good this time. Getting out of the house for these workshops would be good therapy for him. Papa was a soft-spoken Chinese pre-law student. He wore a checkered button-down shirt and jeans that were a size too large. Mystery and I sat down with him at a cafe and asked him the usual questions. "What's your score? What would you like it to be? What are your sticking points?" "Well, I used to be the social chair of my fraternity, and I come from a lot of money. My father is the president of a major university." "Let me cut you off right there," I said. "Instead of gaining our admiration, all you're doing is displaying lower status. A rich man doesn't have to tell you he's rich." Papa nodded stupidly. "Is it okay if I record everything you're saying?" he asked, struggling to pull a small digital recorder out of his pocket. There are certain bad habits we've groomed our whole life, from personality flaws to fashion faux pas, and it has been the role of parents and friends, outside of some minor tweaking, to reinforce the belief that we're okay just as we are. But it's not enough to just be yourself. You have to be your best self. That's why the workshops were so life-transforming. We told each student the first impression he made. We weren't afraid of hurting his feelings. Being uncool and unconfident are just bad habits, which can be changed with enough guidance and willpower. And that was Papa's asset, willpower. I demonstrated some of my best routines on him. The jealous girlfriend opener, the best friends test, and a new piece I had made up involving C-shaped smiles, U-shaped smiles, and the personality characteristics each conveyed. Papa recorded every word on his digital recorder. I should have recognized the signals then. I should have realized what was going on. This wasn't teaching. It was cloning. Mystery and I were traveling around the world making miniature versions of ourselves, and we would soon pay for it. After our last day with Papa, we went to a club called Government. Mystery started talking to a delicate blonde in a strapless dress and a muscular brunette in a do-rag. When he introduced me, he told them I was an amazing illusionist, so I faked him out with a couple of pseudo-magic tricks I'd learned in elementary school. As Mystery isolated the brunette, I talked to the blonde. Her name was Caroline. Her friend was Carly. Caroline lived in the suburbs with her family. Her goal in life was to be a nurse. Caroline's face was dappled with pinprick freckles. One of her teeth was crooked. She smelled like cotton. Her favorite color was probably pink. I observed all these things as my mouth moved, reciting the routine I told to hundreds of girls before. What was different about Caroline was that the routines didn't seem to be working. I just couldn't reach what I called the hook point. "Why don't we all grab a bite to eat?" Mystery suggested. During the meal, everything suddenly clicked in the group. Carly felt comfortable enough to unleash her biting wit, and Caroline began to radiate empathy and warmth. We didn't need any routines or tactics. We all just made fun of ourselves and each other. Afterward, Carly invited us to call a cab from her apartment around the corner. We didn't call a cab, and the girls didn't remind us to, which we took as an IOI. Carly soon left the room with Mystery. As Caroline and I wrapped ourselves around each other, her touch was gentle, her body frail and forgiving. But when I reached for a condom, I heard the 5 words that had taken the place of "let's just be friends" in my life. But I just met you. She was 19. She said she hadn't had sex in almost 2 years. The reason? She said she had a 1-year-old child, Carter, and she was determined not to be another neglectful teenage mother. This was the first time she'd been apart from him for a weekend. After the girls dropped us off at home, Mystery and I broke down the events of the night. Despite what I had thought, Mystery hadn't even gotten a kiss from Carly. She had a boyfriend. So we concocted a plan, the freeze-out. If women have sex for validation, Mystery figured, why not take validation away from her? The plan was to ignore her until she became so uncomfortable she wanted to cozy up to him just to make things normal again. I called Caroline, and she picked us up that evening. Mystery, who was freezing us all out, made dinner somewhat uncomfortable. If his plan worked, it would be worth it. If not, then he was just an asshole. Afterwards, Mystery said decisively, "We're heading back to my place." Caroline and I lay on the bed and slowly undressed each other. Her body was trembling with so much emotion that it seemed to dissipate beneath me. It felt like making love to a cloud. When she came, she didn't make a sound. Afterwards, she rolled away from me and grew distant. I knew what she was thinking. When I asked her, she burst into tears. "I gave it up too fast. Now I'm never going to see you again." I told her that I'd be sad if I never saw her again. It wasn't a line. When we finally emerged into the front room, we found Carly and Mystery wrapped around each other in a blanket. Judging by the clothing strewn across the floor, Mystery's freeze-out had been a success. The next night, Caroline drove to Mystery's house, and we all went out for sushi. "Where's Carly?" Mystery asked. Caroline flushed. "She, couldn't make it." "Did she say why?" "Well," Caroline said, she's with her boyfriend." Mystery's face went pale. After a long silence, he asked Caroline to drive him to the strip club where his ex-girlfriend Patricia worked. She dropped him off in the parking lot and then took me to spend the night at the house in the suburbs. Her mother greeted us at the door. In her arms was a crying baby. While I was playing daddy with Caroline, Mystery was spiraling. Not only would Patricia not take him back, but she also told him that she'd started dating other people. "She's been working out 3 hours a day," he said over the phone, "and her ass is a 10. The things a chick will do when she's angry." Mystery's own theories on attraction had come back to slap him in the face. Patricia was doing a takeaway. But for her, it wasn't a technique. It was for real. The morning after, Mystery lay slumped in the back seat of Caroline's car, wrapped in a blanket, a hat pulled over his eyes. Beyond asking us to drop him off at his family's condo, he didn't say a word. Afterwards, I didn't really want to go back to Caroline's. I hate the suburbs. But Caroline didn't want to be away from her son. So while she played with Carter the next day, I checked my email. There were 2 from Mystery. In the first, he wrote that he'd gotten into a fight with his sister. I had to restrain her by grabbing her throat and flipping her to the ground. I didn't have to go back to my house. The second one read simply, "I'm cracking up, and I'm going to get sleeping pills because if I stay up all night alone, I'll go nuts. I can't wait to disappear." He was losing his mind, and I was stuck in bumblefuck Ontario watching Britney Spears in Crossroads. The next morning, I had Caroline drive me to Mystery's place. He was sitting on the bed working on a half-finished email. "I'm telling the students in New York the seminar is canceled." "Why are you doing that?" I was pissed. I put a month of my life on hold so we could go to New York and Bucharest together. "Not enough people. Oh, well." "Come on," I said. "You're already making $1,800. "Living," he sighed. "Costs too much." It was all too melodramatic for me. The guy was a black hole sucking up attention. Fuck him. I gave his dresser a mule kick. A prescription bottle hit the floor, scattering pills. I picked it up and looked at it. Richraville. What are these? They're my sister's antidepressant pills. I figured they couldn't be doing much good, so I left 3 in the bottle and stuffed the rest in my pocket. I found Caroline in the front room. Let's go back to your house. She smiled weakly, sympathetically. In that moment, I hated her. She just seemed so useless. I spent the next day juggling airplane tickets and travel plans. One of the reasons I became a writer is that, unlike directing movies or acting in a theatrical production, you can do it alone. Your success and failure depend entirely on yourself. I had idolized Mystery. I had wanted to be him, but like most everyone else, he was his own worst enemy. When I checked the seduction boards that day, there was one new message from him. Its title, Mystery's Last Post. Just wanted to say thanks for the memories and good luck to you all, your friend, Mystery. I went to his website, and it had been taken down already. He looked like a big baby who was about to kill himself. I'd no idea it had gotten this serious, Martina, his sister, said. She packed him a suitcase while his mother brought him downstairs and headed towards a car that would take him to the psychiatric hospital. As she opened the door for him, a 4-set of girls poured out of an SUV parked in front of them. For a moment, a spark of life slicked in Mystery's eyes. I watched them, hoping to hear him say those 6 magical words. Is this your set or mine? But his eyes went dead again. His mother slammed the door shut. I saw his face through the glass, the smiling blonde 4-set reflected against it. He stared blankly ahead, his jaw set, his labret piercing, angrily glinting in the cold afternoon light. Mystery's breakdown triggered a crisis of faith in the community. Papa was failing out of school. A San Francisco PUA named Adonis had been fired from his advertising job, and my writing had come to a near standstill. I like to say that we all came to our senses, that we relegated seduction to a glorified hobby. But there's a concept in hypnosis called fractionation, and it states that if a person under hypnosis is brought out of the trance and then put back under, the trance will be even deeper and more powerful. It was when I went to Croatia that I realized everything had changed. I was no longer in the game to meet women. I was in the game to lead men. 2 of the Croatian pickup artists I was staying with had even shaved their heads in emulation of pictures of me they had seen online. Niel Strauss was officially dead. In the eyes of these men, I was style, the king of the unnaturals. All over the world, people were using my jokes, my comebacks, my lines, to meet, kiss, and fuck girls. I had overshot my goal. Now I had to prove myself every time I went out. Before I joined the community, I'd been afraid of failing in front of women. Now I was afraid of failing in front of men. Where simply talking to a stranger was enough to elate me in my AFC days, now I needed to have her in my bed within a week. As a community, we had reached a new height of arrogance. I'm starting to feel like I'm hunting rabbits with a howitzer, a student told me. Any PUAs who had been disillusioned with the community after Mystery's breakdown was soon back in the game full throttle, and the most full throttle of them all was Papa. Papa's pledge to study for law school had lasted a month. Then he went on a road trip, imitating what he'd seen me do, travel the world, meet different PUAs, and become the best. There was one fledgling PUA, in particular, who Papa bonded with, a 22-year-old Canadian. He called himself Tyler Durden, after the seditious character in Fight Club, and like a virus or a demagogue, choose your simile, he would eventually change the course of the community and everyone in it. A philosophy student at Queen's University, Ontario, Tyler hit the seduction boards like a hurricane. Within a couple of months, he had consumed nearly every piece of relevant information on seduction and reinvented himself as an authority, delivering stream-of-consciousness essays and field reports full of impressive feats and braggadocio. Like thumbtacks to a magnet, the seduction boys were up his ass, and soon he was Papa's trusted wing. Tyler Durden advocated a new mission. He called it Project Mayhem in honor of Fight Club. The directive was to run up to an attractive woman and, before even uttering a word, lightly body check her. whack her on the head with something soft, or physically accost her in some other playful manner. Soon, hundreds of sergeants around the world were suddenly knocking into women with grocery carts and smacking them with gym bags. It wasn't seduction, it was elementary school recess. And therein lays appeal. Tyler Durden made seduction seem subversive, yet every time he had the option of getting laid, he seemed to back down. Mystery was back. He'd been released from hospital, and the following week, Tyler Durden would be driving in to take a one-on-one workshop. I came out of this strange emotional journey with some incredible cognitive models, Mystery told me. He was in a manic mode. He hadn't exactly returned. He had transformed. I have my life goals set, he continued. This year, I will build the foundation to take down Copperfield. I am a superstar. My brain pupated into a butterfly. I asked him if he was on any medication. He said he wasn't. I've given it a great deal of thought, he went on. I only get depressed when I isolate myself, so we need to design a social environment with people to motivate me. Something like Sweater's Place in Australia. I'm calling it Project Hollywood. I shine, he went on. I see this now. And I'd like you to come and be a star with me. Mystery wanted to book me for 3 months straight, but I couldn't commit to the time. There was something I used to do before I was a full-time pickup artist. It was called writing. Somewhere in another life, I used to wake up in the morning, sit at a desk before even eating or showering, and stew in my own filth as I sat typing on a computer and not getting laid. I needed to put my life back in balance. In the process of dehumanizing the opposite sex, I'd also been dehumanizing myself. What I didn't tell Mystery was that I didn't trust him anymore. I wasn't going to set aside time and buy plane tickets only to have him break down on me again. It didn't take Mystery long to find two enthusiastic wings to replace me, Tyler Durden and Papa. I wasn't surprised. The pair were constantly in Toronto, staying at his apartment. Mystery would call to fill me in on their progress. He'd say, I've humbled Tyler Durden with my game. He was an asshole at first, but we've broken through that. So, should I let him stay at my place when he comes to town with Papa? He's part of the PUA family. I just think of him as an annoying cousin who farts a lot. 1 week later, Papa and Tyler Durden were on my doorstep. Papa actually looked somewhat cool. He wore a leather jacket and sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. Behind him was the palest non-albino human being I had ever seen. A shock of orangey blonde stuck straight up from his ovoid head. His smile seemed like a plastic snap-on attachment, and his features were flattened as if pressed back by an invisible stocking. He nodded at me when he walked in. No word of greeting, no eye contact. Maybe he was nervous. We went out to dinner. Tyler opened up. In fact, he talked nonstop. He liked to talk around a point rather than getting to it. My head spun listening to him. I was busting on this girl, Michelle. I was busting on her hard fucking busting dude. Here he pulled his head back, pursed his mouth, raised his eyebrows, and started nodding. The gesture was meant to convey how hard the busting was, but it looked strange. Then this dude comes up to her and is like, Michelle, you are so cute. You are the bomb. And she looks at me and goes, I hate it when guys do that. Now I will never ever like him. I only want a guy who doesn't want me. I hate guys who want me. I hate it. Despite everything, I wanted to like Tyler Durden. Everyone else seemed to. The reports of his skills were stellar. And one of the biggest egos of them all, Ross Jeffries, was getting left behind. Speed seduction seemed as archaic to the new generation of community members as buying a girl flowers, and Ross wasn't happy about it. I returned home to find the following message. Hey, Style, it's Ross. I'm in a cranky mood. I'm just going to tell you that it's uneven. It won't kill you to take me to more than one party, buddy, though I think you owe me a lot more than that. If you don't come through, I won't get mad. I'll just cut you out of the speed seduction community. I really will. If it sounds like a challenge I'd issue to a girl, so be it. I called Ross a couple of nights later and invited him to dinner. He wasn't as angry as I thought he'd be, chiefly because his mind was consumed by someone else, Tyler Durden. There's something creepy about his lack of ordinary human warmth. I wouldn't be surprised if sooner or later he breaks from mystery and just teaches totally on his own. He's uncomfortable around people who are more powerful than him. Though I wrote the comment off as more of Ross's competitive paranoia, Tyler Durden soon proved him right. Mystery flew to England to teach another round of workshops. When he left with glowing reviews, Tyler Durden and Papa stayed behind to run a few workshops of their own to satisfy the demand. Mystery phoned as soon as he returned to Toronto. My father has lung cancer, so he's on the way out. It's strange, but the first person I wanted to call was you. So how do you feel about it? I'm not upset, but my mom was crying, and it's the first time I've ever seen her cry. Dad always wanted whiskey poured on his grave, so my brother said, I just hope he doesn't mind me filtering it through my bladder first. Mystery laughed. I tried to force a chuckle out for his sake, but it didn't come. The image wasn't funny to anyone who didn't hate the guy. Meanwhile, Tyler Durden and Papa were running wild in Europe. At first, they pretty much taught Mystery's material, but that all changed one night in Leicester Square. It was here that A-mogging was born. The alpha male of the group, a constant thorn in the side of Sarge's. There's nothing more humiliating than having a lumbering high school quarterback pick you up from behind and make fun of your peacocking gear in front of the girls you're trying to game. It's a constant reminder that you're just a closet nerd. Tyler Durden may have been the biggest closet nerd of us all, but what he lacked in coolness, he made up for in analysis. He could watch a human interaction and break it down to physical, verbal, social, and psychological components that powered it. An A-mogging or cutting a competitive male cockblock out of a set appealed to his subversive side. Stealing a woman from the jocks who used to pick on him at school was a taste far sweeter than simply seducing a woman sitting alone in a cafe. So he watched the body language. A-mogs used to lower his status in sets. He observed the eye contact they used to signify to girls that he was a creep. Soon he laid out a new social order, where the strong live off the weak and the clever live off the strong. Now nothing could stop the PUAs. They could steal girls right from under the disbelieving eyes of boyfriends the size of refrigerators. Mystery was outraged. Tyler Durden and Papa had set up their own website and rival company. Mystery had called his classroom seminars social dynamics. They called their in-field workshops real social dynamics. It was time for me to move. Time to stake a claim on the seduction subculture before another writer beat me to it. So, I called an editor I knew at the style section of the New York Times. It seemed like an appropriately named section. The night before the story on my double life was published, I slept fitfully. I'd created this character, Style. Now, in 2,000 words of newsprint, I was going to kill him. I was sure everyone in the community would be pissed off that there had been a traitor in their midst. I had nightmares of Sarges gathering outside my house with torches to burn me alive, but no amount of worrying could have prepared me for the response. There was none. To the Sarges, I was a pickup artist first and a journalist second. Instead of being upset at Niel Strauss for infiltrating their community, they were proud of Style for getting an article in the New York Times. I hadn't killed Style at all. I'd only made him stronger. Sargers Googled my name and ordered my books on Amazon, writing long posts detailing my career. Even more surprising, I didn't want to leave the subculture. Though I'd more than attained my goal as a pickup artist, I had, accidentally, found the sense of belonging that had eluded me my whole life. Shortly after the article came out, I received a phone call from Will Danner, the features editor at Rolling Stone. We're doing a cover story on Tom Cruise. That's great, I said. Yeah, he wants you to do it. Why? I've never interviewed an actor before. He read that article you wrote in the Times on the pickup guys. He wants to go to wheelie school with you. What's wheelie school? It's where you learn to do motorcycle wheelies. Sounds cool. I neglected to tell Will that I'd never ridden a motorcycle in my life. He was the first person I'd met since joining the seduction community who didn't let me down. "This is gonna be great, man." Tom Cruise smashed a friendly elbow into my chest. It was the exact same amogging gesture that Tyler Durden had written about in London. He wore black bike leathers with a matching helmet tucked under his left arm and 2 days of stubble on his chin. "I'm training to jump a trailer." He pointed to a mobile home sitting just off the track. "It'll be bigger than that one, but it's not that hard." He squinted at the vehicle for a moment, visualizing the feat. "Well, the jumping's not that hard. It's the landing that's difficult." Tom Cruise was the perfect specimen. He was the amog that Tyler Durden and Mystery and everyone else in the seduction community had been trying to emulate. He had a natural ability to remain dominant, physically and mentally, in any social situation without seeming to exert any effort. He was the living embodiment of all 6 of Mystery's 5 characteristics of an alpha male. Nearly everyone in the community had studied his films to learn body language. There was so much I wanted to ask him, but first I needed to confirm something. "So, what made you pick me for this article?" "I dug your New York Times piece. You were writing about the dating guys." So it was true. He paused and his eyes narrowed to slits, indicating that he was speaking about a serious topic. His left eye closed a little more than his right one, giving the appearance of deep intensity. "Now, is that guy you wrote about in your article really saying that the character in Magnolia is based on him? Is he saying that?" He was talking about Ross Jeffries. One of Ross's claims to fame was that he was the inspiration for Frank T.J. Mackey, the character Cruise played, an arrogant seduction teacher with unresolved father issues who orders his students to respect the cock. "He shouldn't." Cruise swallowed a salt pill and chased it down with a long swig of bottled water. "That's not okay. It's not true, really. That guy is not Mackey at all. It's not Mackey." It seemed important for Cruise to establish this. "I worked on creating that character with Paul Thomas Anderson for 4 months, and I didn't use that guy at all." Cruise sat me on his 1000cc Triumph motorcycle and taught me how to start the engine and shift gears. Then he raced around the track, popping wheelies, while I wiped out going 5 miles an hour. Afterwards, he brought me to his trailer. The walls were covered with pictures of the children he and his ex-wife Nicole Kidman had adopted. "Has this Jeffries guy turned his character more Mackey-ish since the movie?" "He's arrogant and megalomaniacal like Mackey, but he's not as alpha male as Mackey." "I'll tell you something." Cruise sat down at a table spread with finger sandwiches and cold cuts. "When I did that monologue as Mackey, we didn't tell the audience anything about what we were doing. And the guys just started getting pumped up as I was talking, so at the end of the day, PTA and I had to get on stage and say, 'Look, man, we just want to tell you that where this character is going and what he's saying is not good. It's not okay.'" Here came the lecture. First Dustin, now Tom Cruise. I couldn't understand it. What was wrong with learning how to meet women? That's what we're here for. It's how the species survives. All I wanted was an evolutionary edge. So why not work at it and learn to do well? Who says you're allowed to take lessons in motorcycle riding, but not in interacting with women? Everyone wants to be seduced. It makes us feel wanted. We made this whole speech because the guys were taking what we were saying and going with it and getting onto it. So PTA and I were saying, "Hey man, oh my God, easy." As he remembered that moment, Cruise let out a laugh. And Cruise doesn't laugh like ordinary people do. His laugh takes over a room. It comes on just fine, a regular laugh by any standards. You will be laughing too, but then, when the humor subsides, you will stop laughing. At this point, however, Cruise's laugh will just be crescendoing, and he will be making eye contact with you. Yeah. And you will try to laugh again to join him because you know you're supposed to, but it doesn't come out right because it's not natural. He will squeeze out a couple of words sometimes between chuckles. It's not real in this case. And then he will stop as suddenly as he started, and you will be relieved. "Well," I told him, squeezing out the last breath of an awkward laugh, "that's easy for you to say." We spent the next week together visiting various Scientology buildings. It's no secret that Tom Cruise is a member of the Church of Scientology. a religion, self-help group, cult started by the science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard. But Cruz had never taken a journalist into that world before. The more I learned about L. Ron Hubbard, the more I realized that he was the exact same personality type as Mystery and Ross Jeffries and Tyler Durden. They were wickedly smart megalomaniacs who knew how to synthesize great bodies of knowledge and experience into personality-driven brands, which they sold to people who didn't feel like they were getting what they needed out of life. They were obsessive students of the principles that guided human behavior, but the ethics of and motivation for their use of those principles made them controversial figures. On our last day together, Cruz took me on a tour of the Scientology Celebrity Center in Hollywood, where I saw a classroom full of students being trained to use e-meters, devices that measure skin conductance. When curious civilians come into the church, they are hooked up to the e-meters and asked various questions. Afterward, the interviewer goes over the results with them and tells them why they need to join the Church of Scientology to fix their problems. Students were paired up in the classroom, role-playing the various scenarios that can occur during an interview. They had large books spread out in front of them. Everything the interviewer utters, every response to every contingency, was contained in those books. Nothing was left to chance. What they were rehearsing, I realized, was a form of pickup. Without a rigid structure, rehearsed routines, and troubleshooting tactics, there would be no recruitment. One of my main frustrations with Sarging was repeating the same lines over and over. I was getting tired asking girls if they thought spells worked, or if they noticed how their noses wiggled when they laughed. I just wanted to walk into a set and say, "Love me, I'm style." But after watching the auditors, I began to think that perhaps routines weren't training wheels after all. They were the bike. Every form of demagoguery depends on them. Religion is pickup. Politics is pickup. Life is pickup. Every day we have our routines, which we rely on to make people like us or to get what we want or to make someone laugh. After the tour, Cruz and I ate lunch in the Celebrity Center restaurant. He was wearing a dark green crewneck T-shirt that fit his body like a glove. Over a healthy slab of steak, he discussed his values. He believed in learning new things, doing the work required of him, and competing with no one but himself. He was strong-willed, centered, and resolute. Any turmoil that must be resolved, any issue that must be handled, was solved first and foremost in a dialogue between Tom Cruise and himself. "I don't really keep counsel with others," he said. "I'm the kind of person who will think about something, and if I know it's right, I'm not going to ask anybody. I don't go, 'Boy, what do you think about this?' I've made every decision for myself, in my career, in my life." Cruz leaned forward in his chair, resting his elbows on his lap, his head parallel with the surface of the table. As he spoke, he expressed himself through gesture as subtle as changing the aperture of his eyes. The guy was born to sell things: movies, himself, Scientology, you. Whenever I criticized myself or made an excuse for myself, he jumped down my throat. "I'm sorry," I said at one point when discussing an article I'd written. "I don't mean to sound like one of those writer guys." "Why are you apologizing? Why not be a writer guy?" Then he continued mockingly, "No, you don't want to be one of those guys who's creative and expressive." He was right. I had thought I was done with gurus, but I needed one more. Tom Cruise was teaching me more about in the game than Mystery, Ross Jeffries, Steve P., or my father ever had. He stood up and slammed his fist down on the table, hard, AMOG style. "Why don't you want to be one of those guys? Be one of those guys, man. I mean it. That's cool." Okay. Cruz says it's cool. Case closed. As we talked, I realized that out of all the people I'd met in my lifetime, no one had their head screwed on more tightly than Tom Cruise. And this was a disturbing thought because nearly every idea Tom Cruise expressed could be found somewhere in the massive writings of L. Ron Hubbard. I discovered this when Cruz had his personal Scientology liaison bring a heavy red book to the table. He opened it to the Scientology Code of Honor, and we discussed it. Point by point, set a good example. Fulfill your obligations. Never need praise or approval or sympathy. Don't compromise your own reality. When Cruz promised to send me an invitation for the Center's annual Scientology Gala, I began to worry that this wasn't about an article for Rolling Stone at all. It was about getting another convert to Scientology. If that was true, he'd picked the wrong person. "Let me ask you something else about the article you wrote," Tom said. "A lot of that stuff is about trying to control people and manipulate situations. If they took that effort and put it towards something constructive, who knows what they could accomplish?" The interview ended. The article was published, and Tom Cruise and I would meet again. I would be a different person then, but he would be the same. He was an AMOG, and he had AMOG'd me. However, he hadn't converted me. He had his church, I had mine. My church, however, still needed to be built. Tom Cruise was right. All our effort did need to be put towards something constructive. Now I knew where. Project Hollywood, our church of the spread legs. The epiphany came to me on my birthday. Some of the PUAs threw a party for me at a Hollywood club called Highlands. About 300 guests came, along with the big boys, Ross Jeffries, Steve P., Grimble. Despite such heavy hitters working the room, I had zero competition because, for the night, I was the man. I was dressed like a dandy, in a long black jacket with a single button at the top and a cream shirt with ruffled sleeves exposed at my wrists. And I was surrounded by women, fuck buddies, friends, strangers. I didn't need routines, boyfriend destroyers, gimmicks, or wings. All I needed was a big pocket to hold all the scraps of paper. Mystery had recently developed another theory of social interaction. It basically stated that women are constantly judging a man's value in order to determine if it can help them with their life objectives of survival and replication. In the microcosmic world we had created at the Highlands that night, I had the highest social value in the room. In the end, I took a petite, mischievous stripper named Joanna back to my house. While she was on my bed, grinding me through my clothes, she asked, "What do you do for a living?" What? I couldn't believe she would ask that, but she seemed to need that piece of information in order to explain my status at the party. "What do you do?" she asked again. And that's when I had the epiphany. Sarging is for losers. What got me laid on my birthday was not sarging, but lifestyle. Lifestyle is something that is worn, not discussed. It is something that screams, "Ladies, abandon your mundane, unfulfilled lives and step into my exciting world." It was time to take this brotherhood to the next level. Time to pool our resources and design a lifestyle in which the women came to us. It was time for Project Hollywood. All Mystery had needed was the word go. "Now is the time, Style," he said when he arrived at my apartment. "Let's build this shit." I knew he'd understand. We were greater than the sum of our cocks. The first step to making Project Hollywood a reality was to find a mansion with guest rooms, a hot tub, and a location near the clubs on Sunset. Next, we needed to hand-select the best in the community to live with us. Perhaps I shouldn't have trusted Mystery again. But his name wasn't going to be on the lease, neither would mine for that matter. We'd find a third party to take the responsibility. We found that third party living in the Furama Hotel. His name was Papa. His grades had kept him out of law school, so instead he enrolled in Loyola Marymount to study business. The day he moved from Wisconsin, he took a taxi to my apartment. "The three most influential people in my life," Papa told us as he sat down on the couch at Mystery's feet, "have been you two and my father." I left him to talk with Mystery while I ran downstairs to a Caribbean food stand to get dinner for everyone. When I returned, Papa was Mystery's manager. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" I asked Mystery. "Papa likes the business and he can fill workshops every weekend," Mystery replied, "so all I have to do is show up." "It's win-win," Papa insisted. He was smarter than I'd given him credit for. He was going to become the middleman for the biggest pickup artist in the community. And they were all going to let him, because most artists have the same fatal flaw. They're too lazy to deal with anything practical themselves. "There are 3 places I really like," Papa said when we met him one afternoon. "There's a mansion on Mulholland Drive, there's a former Rat Pack crib off Sunset, and there's the super mansion which has tennis courts and a built-in nightclub." "Well, I'm for the super mansion," I told him. "How much is it?" $50,000 a month." "Forget it." Papa's face clouded. He didn't like the word no. The Rat Pack crib was on Sunset Boulevard, and it was $36,000 cheaper per month than the super mansion. The living room looked like a ski lodge. There was a fireplace, a sunken dance floor, a 30-foot-high ceiling, and a large bar in the corner. The space could easily hold a few hundred people for seminars and parties. There were 2 bedrooms off the living room on the ground floor. Outside each of these rooms was a staircase leading up to another bedroom, and then there was a small maid's room off the kitchen. There were 2 patios shaded by trees, a brick terrace with a pool, a jacuzzi, a dining area, and a working barbecue. Beyond lay a landscaped hill with a path winding up to a small, secluded deck. From there, we could see the glittering lights of Hollywood. The place was a chick magnet. The first night, we all sat in the jacuzzi gazing at the palm trees. There were no girls. We didn't need any to validate us. Tonight, it was just the boys. We had done it. Project Hollywood was not just a fantasy anymore. "We'll make the house famous without public exploits," Mystery predicted. "People will drive by and say that was the home of Style, Mystery, and Papa, and Herbal. They built their careers here and had parties that were the envy of the world." Herbal was our 4th roommate. He was a tall, pale, even-tempered 22-year-old PUA from Austin who peacocked by painting his nails silver and wearing all-white clothing. Like the rest of us, he was a reformed geek. A few days later, Papa moved a 5th roommate, Playboy, into the maid's room. Playboy was a party promoter from New York. He was tall and slender with thick black hair, but he had a bad habit of wearing long, artsy scarves and pants pulled up to his belly button. Then there was Xenaeus. He lived in a tent in the backyard. Xenaeus was a stocky, fresh-faced college soccer player from Colorado who said he'd sleep anywhere and do anything. At our initial house meeting, we laid down the rules. No unapproved house guests for more than a month. Anyone conducting a seminar in the living room has to give the house fund a 10% kickback, and no charging women another PUA has brought into the house. All these rules would soon be broken. I initially enjoyed living with my roommates, leaving my introverted writer's world and being part of a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. When Playboy threw our first party, 500 people showed up. Project Hollywood was already a success. And then Tyler Durden arrived. "I know I didn't make a good impression in L.A." He shook my hand. He even looked me in the eye for a microsecond. He wore a trendy black and white shirt with ropes hanging from the ribcage area like a corset. It wasn't peacocky. It was the kind of shirt I would have bought. Tyler slung his bag over his shoulder and walked up to Papa's room. Tyler Durden had never been approved as a resident. However, Papa had taken it upon himself to invite him, converting one of his bathroom closets into an extra bedroom by putting a mattress on the floor. We didn't have furniture yet, just 50 throw pillows we'd bought to cover the sunken dance floor. That night, Playboy rigged his movie projector to show films on the ceiling, and we all lay in a pillow pit and watched Carnal Knowledge. Afterward, Tyler Durden turned to me. "Your archive has been really influential in my game. A lot of my best shit I took from there." It was hard to get out of a conversation with him. Whenever he wasn't playing the game, he was talking about it. "I've been experimenting with telling people I'm you in the field," Tyler said. "What do you mean?" "I tell them I'm Niel Strauss and that I write for Rolling Stone." "And does it get results?" The idea of this pasty little freak running around telling people he was me turned my stomach. "Well, it depends. Sometimes they think I'm lying. Sometimes girls instantly say, 'Oh my God, we should hang out.'" That weekend, Tyler Durden, Mystery, and I went to Las Vegas. Papa had booked 10 students for Mystery. We took them to the Hard Rock Casino. When I noticed Tyler Durden sarging a bachelorette party, I inched closer to listen. He was talking about Mystery. "See that tall guy in the top hat? He needs a lot of attention, so he'll say hurtful things to people just to make them like him, so humor him because he needs help." He was giving away Mystery's negs. "He likes doing magic tricks to get people to accept him," he continued, "so pretend like you're excited. He does a lot of children's birthday parties." Now he was neutralizing Mystery's value-demonstrating routines. After Tyler Durden left the set, I asked him what he was doing. Papa and I have developed a lot of new techniques to blow you and Mystery out, he said. So, what do you say about me? I asked, trying to pretend I wasn't disturbed. Tyler Durden started laughing. We say, there's style. He's actually 45 years old, but he looks pretty young to me. He's so cute. He's like a little Elmer Fudd. I stared at him in disbelief. He was amogging his fellow PUAs. You can get me, Tyler said. You can say I look like the Pillsbury Doughboy. I choked back my disgust and thought, what would Tom Cruise do? But I don't want to get you, man, I replied, giving him a big smile. Here's the difference between you and me. I like to surround myself with people who are better than me because I enjoy being challenged. You, on the other hand, like to become the best person in the room by eliminating anyone who's better than you. For the rest of the weekend, whenever I talked to a person, male or female, Tyler Durden was hovering behind me. Soon he would know more about me than I did. At the end of the night, I saw a two-set sitting at the bar in the Peacock Lounge. A tall, creepy, bespectacled brunette and a short blonde tomboy with a white beret and a thick, curvy body. That blonde girl's a porn star, Mystery said. Her name's Faith. That's your set. Despite the year and a half I had spent in the community, my old AFC self was always threatening to snap back, whispering that all this game talk was just mental masturbation. But I pushed myself to enter the set and went into autopilot. I opened with Jealous Girlfriend. I gave myself a time constraint. I negged the target about her hoarse voice. I did the best friends test. C-shaped smiles versus U-shaped smiles. ESP experiment. There's so much I can learn from you, Faith said. We love you, gushed her creepy friend. I'm a nerdy Elmer Fudd spouting bullshit tests I made up, and these two girls whose collective breasts weigh more than me were staring at me rapt. No guy out there had the tools we did. I must kill off the inner AFC. When will he die? I signaled to Mystery to wing the obstacle. As he sat next to the creepy girl, I went back on autopilot. Evolution, phase shift. Smell. Pull hair. Bite arm. Bite neck. How do you rate yourself as a kisser on a scale of 1 to 10? Suddenly, Faith jumped out of her seat. I'm getting too turned on. I have to leave. I couldn't figure out if she was just giving me an excuse because I had made a mistake at some point or if I was really that good. I approached the nearby set, 2 hippie girls. 10 minutes into our conversation, however, Faith returned, grabbed my hand, and said, "Let's go to the bathroom." As she unbuttoned my pants, she said, "You so turn me on, intellectually and sexually." "I know," I told her. "How?" "I felt a connection all night, even when I was talking to those other 2 girls. I saw you looking at me." She kneeled on the floor, circled her hands around my limp father of thousands, and lowered her mouth over it. But I couldn't get hard. I stood up and pushed her roughly against the wall. I circled my hands around her throat and made out with her, as I'd seen Sin do to women in his house when I was still in AFC. She arched her back, fluttered her eyelids, moaned, and went down on me again. "I want you to come in my mouth." I still couldn't get hard. This had never happened to me before. I mean, I'm hard right now as I'm remembering this. "I want to be inside you," I told her, in a last-ditched effort to get my blood flowing to the right place. I pulled a condom out of my pocket and thought about every beautiful woman I had approached that night. As soon as I was partway inside her, I went soft again. When we walked out of the bathroom, half the workshop students were standing there celebrating a feat that hadn't actually happened. On the last night of the Las Vegas workshop, Tyler Durden picked up a hostess named Stacy at the Hard Rock Cafe. She was a vampirish blonde who listened to nu metal. I was wearing a ridiculous snakeskin suit. Mystery was dressed in a top hat, flight goggles, and a black T-shirt with a red digital sign that said Mystery on it. Even for Vegas, he looked like a freak. Within minutes, Tyler Durden was amogging him to Stacy. "He wears those weird signs and people laugh at him. I always tell him he doesn't need to do that for people to accept him." The students fanned around the room to talk to women as I leaned against the bar and watched them. After a while, Stacy sidled up next to me. As we talked, she held eye contact. She played with her hair. She looked for excuses to touch my arm. All the IOIs were there. I knew it was wrong. She was Tyler Durden's girl, but if Tyler Durden was going to tell girls I was Elmer Fudd, then Elmer Fudd was going to hunt his rabbits. Would she like to kiss me? She would. We did. Then a shock of orangey blonde hair appeared in the periphery of my vision. "Come with me," Tyler Durden said, grabbing her arm. I started to apologize. What I had done was wrong. Tyler Durden, however, would never forgive me for making out with his target. My father died when I was 40, and I couldn't find a way to cry. Not because I didn't love him, not because he didn't try. I cried for every lesser thing, whiskey, pain, and beauty. But he deserved a better tear, and I was not quite ready. Mystery was lying in a pillow pit, his computer on his chest playing The Randall Knife over and over. My dad died. He had another stroke, and then he died at 10 a.m. today. I sat down next to him and listened to him talk. It's like when Johnny Cash died. You knew it was going to happen, but it was still a shock. Mystery had hated his dad and wished death on him countless times, but now that it had happened, he didn't know how to feel. He seemed confused that he felt a little sad despite himself. The only times we ever bonded were when a hot woman came on TV. Then he'd look at me and I'd look at him and we'd quietly appreciate it together. A few days later, we hosted the first annual Pickup Artists Summit at our house. PUAs from around the world flew in to speak. For my presentation, I brought in 5 of the girls I was dating. I ran routines on them and then used them as a panel of experts to critique the clothing and body language of various wannabe players in the audience. I received a standing ovation. Afterwards, I sat on our newly purchased blood-red couches surrounded by Papa, Tyler Durden, and a few of his students. "It's so genius," Papa was saying. "Tyler Durden has broken down everything style does to a science. He calls it style mugging." "What's that?" one of the students asked. "It's a type of frame control," Tyler Durden replied. "A frame is the perspective through which one sees the world. Whoever's frame is the strongest tends to dominate an interaction. Style makes sure that the focus is always on him. I'm writing a post about it." "That's awesome," I said. Papa, Tyler Durden, and the students laughed. "That's one of the things you do," Papa said. "Tyler's writing about that." "What?" I just said, "Awesome. I think it's hilarious. Seriously, I can't wait to read it." They all laughed again. Evidently, I was style-mogging them. "See," Tyler Durden said, "you use your curiosity as a frame to get rapport and make the other person lose social value. When you show approval like that, it makes you the authority and makes other people want to seek your validation. We're teaching that." "Shit," I replied. "Now every time I say something, people are going to think I'm running a real social dynamics routine." They all laughed again. And that's when I realized that I was fucked. What Tyler Durden was writing about was all part of me, who I really was. He was going to take my soul and spread it all over the Sunset Strip, and there was nothing I could do about it. In the meantime, every single rule we had laid down at the house meeting, requiring approval of guests, giving the house a percentage of seminar money, not hitting on other PUA's women, was ignored. We had no idea how many students, sergeants, and instructors Papa was packing into his room. They scurried around the house like peacocked rats. I needed to get out of there. Fortunately, Rolling Stone wanted me to tackle another tough subject. Her name was Courtney Love. The interview was scheduled to take place for 1 hour at the Virgin Records office in New York. Courtney was at the peak of her infamy at that time. That week, she bared her breasts to David Letterman on network TV and had been arrested for allegedly hitting a fan in the head with a microphone stand during a concert. On top of all that, she was facing drug charges and had recently lost custody of her daughter. The Rolling Stone story was the first interview she had agreed to do since all the trouble went down. When I met her, she was wearing a black dress with a sash draped tastefully around her torso. Her lips were painted red and full. Courtney looked good, pale, thin, statuesque. Soon, however, the sash was dangling behind her like a tail, and the lipstick was smeared. It seemed like a metaphor for her life, constantly unraveling. "If you guys are waiting for me to die, you're going to have to wait a long time. My grandmother didn't die until she was 102. This is what PUAs call a bitch shield. It was nothing personal, just a protective mechanism. "I still have nightmares about my grandmother," I told her, because the last time I had a chance to see her, we had plans to go to the Art Institute in Chicago, and I blew her off because I wanted to sleep late. We fluffed for a while about our families. She didn't like hers very much. As the interview continued, I hit the hook points. She looked up at me, and the walls came down. Her face flushed, and tears started dripping. "I need to be saved. You need to save me." Now we had rapport. Rapport equals trust plus comfort. "This one's for the gallbladder," Courtney Love said as she slammed an acupuncture needle into my leg. "Shouldn't this be done by a licensed professional? I've been doing this since I was young, but you're the first person I've done it to in a while." She wiggled the needle around. "Tell me when you feel it." "There, an electric shock, okay? Enough." My scheduled 1-hour interview with Courtney Love had turned into a surreal slumber party. Outside of food runs, I didn't leave her Chinatown loft for 72 hours. It was 5,000 square feet with nothing in it but a bed, a television, and a couch. Dressed down in a t-shirt and sweatpants, she was in hiding from the paparazzi, from her manager, from the government, from the bank, from a man, from herself. I was stripped down in my boxers on her couch, with a dozen needles sticking out of me. Over time, the floor around her bed grew dense with crumbs, cigarette butts, food wrappers, needles, and root beer bottles. Meanwhile, the color of her fingers and toes changed from flesh to blackened ash. She put Boogie Nights into her DVD player, then climbed onto the bed and threw a stained blanket over herself. "I always ask the guy I'm dating, 'What's your biggest fear?' she said. 'The video director I'm currently obsessed with said failure, and I'm living mine. It's loss of power.' The video director wasn't returning her calls. 'If you want to get him,' I said, 'read The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. It'll give you some strategy.' She stubbed her cigarette out on the floor. 'I need all the help I can get.' 'How do you know about that book?' 'I spent the last year and a half hanging out with the world's greatest pickup artists.' She sat up in her bed. 'Tell me, tell me, tell me.' She listened, rapt, as I told her about Project Hollywood. 'I want to meet them,' she said excitedly. 'Do you think they're as good as Warren Beatty?' 'I don't know. I never met him.' Courtney climbed out of bed and rubbed patchouli oil around the needles in my feet, legs, and chest. 'Let me tell you, he's smooth. He once called me and said, "Hey, it's me," as if I should have known who it was. Then he tried to convince me to come over to his house that night. When I finally said yes, he laughed and said he was in Paris. It's a total mindfuck. He'll blow his nose and then hand the dirty tissue to his date." It was a neg. Warren Beatty negged women. "I don't know what this director's problem is," Courtney was saying. "I have a magic pussy. If you fuck me, you become a king. I'm a kingmaker." She began pulling the needles out of my body. Relief. "You have to get one in your head. It's the best feeling." Fumbling around the floor, she grabbed a dirty needle. "No, thanks. I've had enough for today." She dropped the needle back on the floor. "I bet you I can get this director back." "I doubt you can. If he's not returning your calls, he's not interested. He even denied he slept with me in the post. But I like a challenge." When it came time for me to catch my plane, Courtney kissed me goodbye. "I just need to be fucked," she said as I waited for the elevator. "I just need a bossy guy to come here and fuck me." I knew I could have been that guy. The IOIs were there. But there's a PUA's code of honor. There's a gambler's code of honor, and there's a journalist's code of honor. And having sex with her would have been violating all three. Learning pickup had made me a much better interviewer. I discovered just how good when I was assigned an interview with Britney Spears. "Was there a lot of pressure on you while you were making this album?" "What, now?" "Was there a lot of pressure from yourself or the label to have a major hit this time around?" I have no idea. You have no idea? I have no idea. This was going nowhere. I looked at her, crossing her legs and fidgeting on the hotel room couch next to me. She didn't give a shit. I was just an amount of time blocked off on her calendar, and she was tolerating it. Poorly. Her hair was tucked under a white Kangol hat, and her thighs pushed at the seams of her faded blue jeans. She was one of the most desired women in the world, but in person, she looked like a corn-fed Southern sorority girl. She had a beautiful face, lightly and perfectly touched with makeup, but there was something masculine about her. As a sexual icon, she was unintimidating and I imagined lonely. A gear slammed down in my head. There was only one way to save this interview. I had to sarge her. I folded my list of questions and put them in my back pocket. I'll tell you something about yourself that other people probably don't know. People sometimes see you as shy or bitchy off stage, even though you aren't. Totally, she said. Do you want to know why? Yeah. I was creating what's called a yes ladder, capturing her attention by asking questions that require an obvious affirmative answer. I'm watching your eyes when you talk, and every time you think, they go down to the left. That means you're a kinesthetic person. You're someone who lives in her feelings. Oh my God, she said, that's totally true. Of course it was. It was one of the value-demonstrating routines I developed. The eye goes to one of 7 different positions when someone thinks. Each position means the person is accessing a different part of their brain. As I taught her how to read different types of eye movement, her legs uncrossed, and she leaned in toward me. The game was on. I didn't know this. Who told you this? It's something I observed from doing lots of interviews, I answered. In fact, by watching the direction people's eyes move when they speak, you can tell whether they're telling the truth or not. So you're going to know if I'm lying? She was looking at me entirely differently now. I need to do psychology classes. You could meet somebody or be out on a date and be like, are they lying to me right now? Oh my gosh. It was time to pull out the heavy artillery. I'll show you something really cool and then we'll get back to the interview, I said, throwing in a time constraint for good measure. I'm going to try to guess something that's in your thoughts. Then I used a simple psychological gambit to guess the initials of an old friend she had an emotional connection to. The initials were GC. I got 1 letter out of 2 correct, but it was good enough for her. I can't believe you did that. I probably have so many walls in front, so that's why you didn't get both of them. Let's try it one more time. This time, why don't you try it? I'm scared. She put her knuckle in her mouth. I can't do that. She was no longer Britney Spears. She was just a one set, a lone target. We'll make it easier, I said. I'm going to write down a number, and it's a number between 1 and 10. What I want you to do is not to think at all. Just really listen to your feelings. I wrote a number on a piece of paper and handed it to her face down. What if it's wrong? This was what we called in the field an LSE girl. She had low self-esteem. What do you think it is? 7? Now turn over the paper. She slowly turned it over as if she were afraid to look, then moved it up to eye level and saw a big number 7 staring right back at her. She screamed, leaped off the couch, and ran to the hotel mirror. Her mouth hung agape as she looked at her reflection in the eye. Oh my God, I did that! Whoa, I did that! She was like a little girl seeing Britney Spears for the first time. She was her own fan. See, I told her, you already know the answer's inside, but it's just that society trains you to think too much. I really believe that. Cool interview, she exclaimed. I like this interview. This has been the best interview of my life. For the next 15 minutes, we talked about spirituality and writing and our lives. She was just a lost little girl searching for something real to hold on to, something deeper than pop fame and the sycophancy of her handlers. I had demonstrated value, and now we were moving on to the rapport phase of seduction. Rapport equals trust plus comfort. However, I had a job to do. I started the tape recorder and asked the question I'd given her at the start of the interview, plus all the other questions I had. This time she gave me real answers, answers I could print. You know, Britney said, everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that, I told her. I do too, she touched my shoulder. I'd like to exchange numbers. Brittany left the room to change for an MTV interview. She returned 10 minutes later with her publicist. She sat down in front of the cameras and the interview began. "So, you had a crazy time out the other night?" the interviewer asked. "Yeah, I did," Brittany answered. "What was the energy level like in the club when you walked in and surprised everyone?" "Oh, it was just crazy." "And how much fun did you have?" Suddenly, Brittany stood up. "This isn't working. I'm not feeling this." She pivoted on her heels and walked out towards the door, leaving the crew and her assistant befuddled. As she passed me, the corners of her mouth turned upwards, forming a conspiratorial smile. The game, I realized, works better on celebrities than ordinary people because stars are so sheltered and their interactions limited. A demonstration of value or the right neg holds 10 times the power. I had no illusions. Britney Spears was not attracted to me, but I had interested her, and interest plus attraction plus seduction equals sex. Of course, maybe this was all just self-hypnosis. For all I knew, she exchanged phone numbers with every journalist to make him feel special. Maybe I was the one being sarged. I would never know the truth. I stared at that number every day, but I couldn't bring myself to dial it. If it had been Darlene Curtis, the Playmate of the Year, I would have called her back in a second. I had no fear of women like that anymore. But Britney Spears? It took just one woman to bring Project Hollywood down. By all appearances, Katya was a standard-issue party girl. She liked to drink, dance, have sex, and get high, not necessarily in that order. But Katya, perhaps out of innocence, perhaps out of revenge, perhaps out of true love, would outgame every PUA in the house. Katya was just one of several numbers Mystery had collected while demonstrating his game. When he called, she agreed to come over. Katya arrived wearing a pink sweatsuit and dragging along a scrappy little terrier named Lily. Both Katya and Lily instantly made themselves at home. The former collapsed into the pillow pit and the latter took a shit on the carpet. "I'm going to show you some movies I made," Mystery told her. "No worries, no troubles," Katya replied in an upbeat Russian accent. She had a button nose that wiggled and blonde hair that bounced to maximize her cuteness. Mystery dimmed the lights. 3 days later, they closed the deal. "I'm moving out of my apartment," Katya told Mystery. "So is this okay if Lily stays here while I go to Las Vegas this weekend?" While she was gone, we all grew attached to the cheery dog, and, by extension, to its owner. They were both bouncy and energetic, and liked licking Mystery's face. When Katya returned, Mystery said, "It's ridiculous for you to rent a new apartment. Why don't you just move into my room?" Katya quickly wove herself into the fabric of the house. She volunteered to be a pivot for Papa's workshops. She put eyeliner on Herbal before he went out for the night. She cleaned the kitchen. She was giving the house its first rays of warmth since the night we'd sat in the jacuzzi dreaming of the future together. I liked her. We all liked her. Mystery was particularly happy. "I actually have a crush on my own girlfriend," he said one evening. "I need to take care of this girl." Later, as Herbal cooked steak on the barbecue, Katya and I sat in the jacuzzi sharing a bottle of wine. "I'm really scared," she said. "Why?" I asked, though I really knew why. "I'm starting to fall in love with Mystery." A few days later, Mystery and Katya and I flew to Las Vegas. We had dinner at Mr. Lucky's, where Katya put away 2 glasses of champagne, then crossed to Paradise Club, a strip club, where she put away 2 more glasses. When the waitress came to the table, Katya commented to Mystery, "She's really hot." The waitress was a perky Latina with a densely packed body that threatened to burst through her clothing. Soon, she was stopping by our table every few minutes to flirt with Mystery. "I would love to see that girl," Mystery told Katya, "eating you out." "You just want to fuck her!" Katya stormed out of the club like an angry child. Mystery still wasn't getting his threesomes. He made the same mistake every time. He needed to make the experience her fantasy, not his. When I woke up, I took a plane home, leaving the 2 of them alone in the hotel room. A few hours later, I received a phone call. "Hey, it's Katya." "Something wrong?" "No. Mystery wants to marry me. He got down on his knees at the Hard Rock pool and proposed. Everyone applauded. It was so sweet. What should I do?" Don't rush into anything, I advise. Just get engaged, then see if this is something you both really want to do. Mystery grabbed the phone. Hey, man, I love this girl. She's crazy. We're on our way to a chapel, okay? Bye. The guy was an idiot. That evening, Mystery carried Katia over the threshold of Project Hollywood humming, Here Comes the Bride. They'd known each other for 3 weeks. Look at my ring, Katia cooed. Isn't it beautiful? Our rings cost $8,000, Mystery said while Katia was in the bathroom. She loves me now. She gets off calling me her husband. It's like time distortion. Dude, it's the worst routine ever, I replied, because you can only do it once. Mystery took a step toward me. I'm going to tell you a secret. We're not really married. We decided to fake it, so I bought 2 rings for $100. She totally fooled you. You're both great illusionists. Don't tell Katia I told you. She's really enjoying the role-playing on an emotional level. It's the same as really being married for her. He was right. Perception is reality. In the days that followed, their entire relationship changed. Mystery didn't go out anymore. To him, clubs were for sarging. To Katia, though, they were for dancing. So she started going clubbing without him. After a while, Mystery hardly left the room. It wasn't long before they began to resent each other. He'd say, she gets drunk every night, it's driving me crazy. She'd say, when I met him, he had all these plans and ambitions. Now he never leaves his bed. What's the point? Mystery had taught himself everything there was to know about pickup, but nothing about how to maintain a relationship. He had this beautiful creature full of sparkle and life, and he was just throwing it away. Soon, another woman with a very different kind of sparkle would move into Project Hollywood. I received a text message at 11:39 p.m. Can I stay at your house? They repoed the car, and worse, you don't want to know? It was Courtney Love. I knocked on the door of Courtney's apartment. She sat on the floor in the middle of a sea of American Express bills and bank statements with a yellow highlighter in her hand. There are so many loans here that I never knew of or approved. She stood up. If I stay here, I'll do drugs again. That's fine. Herbal said you can sleep in his room. I walked her downstairs and strapped her 60-pound suitcase to the luggage rack on the back of my Corvette. You should know that Katia's brother is staying with us, I said, and if he seems a little off, it's because he has Tourette's. Is that like when you yell, shit balls, uncontrollably? Yeah, it's sort of like that. I parked in the garage and dragged the suitcase upstairs to the house. The first person we saw was Herbal, who was coming out of the kitchen. Hi, shit balls, Courtney said to him. No, I told her, that's not Katia's brother. Her brother walked out of the kitchen a moment later, sipping a Coke. Hi, shit balls, Courtney said to him. She took a step backwards and stepped on Lily, who yelped loudly. Courtney turned around. I assumed she was going to apologize. Fuck off, she told the dog. This was going to be an interesting couple of days. The next morning, I came down to find her in the living room wearing nothing but a pair of silk panties. Her body was covered with black marks as if she'd been rolling around in charcoal. In that state of dishabille, she met Katia. I just took a pregnancy test, Katia told her, puckering her lips into a childish expression of self-pity. It came out positive? You should have a baby, Courtney said. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. Mystery kneeled in front of Katia and kissed her belly. If you want to keep the baby, I will support your decision. It would be a beautiful baby. I can't even believe you think of keeping the baby, Katia replied. You're acting like we're married. I love you, Mystery said, without emotion. Katia and Mystery went to an abortion clinic 3 days later. Guess what? Katia squealed when she returned. I'm not pregnant. Mystery stood behind her, giving her the finger. The look on his face was pure hatred. A few hours later, I found Katia at the bar pouring herself a glass of Chardonnay. Then another. Then another. Wow, you really have been working out. Your arms look good. She squeezed my biceps. You're the only person in the house I can talk to. Look at this. She was lifting her top up now. I got a scratch. That's nice. Here, feel it. She took my hand and pulled it towards her breast. Well, it's been fun talking, but I have to go to my room and floss my cat now. But you don't have a cat. I circled around to the back of the house and entered Mystery's room through the patio. Dude, your wife is hitting on me. I don't care. Well, at least she's not pregnant. Yeah, she's a brainless alcoholic. When I left Mystery's room, Katya was no longer in the living room. Papa's door was open, and she was cuddled next to him on his bed, with her top off. I retreated to my room and waited. An hour later, the storm came. Voices yelled. Doors slammed. Glass smashed. There was a knock on my door. It was Courtney. Are your roommates always this loud? She was one to talk. The noise coming from Mystery's room grew louder. Let's see what's going on, she said. I didn't want to be involved. This wasn't my fucking responsibility. In Mystery's bathroom, Katya was kneeling on the floor with her hands clasped around her neck. Her brother was leaning over her, holding an asthma inhaler. Mystery stood a few feet away. Should I call an ambulance? I asked. They'll arrest her because she has drugs in her system, he said contemptuously. Katya looked up and glared at him. She clearly wasn't dying. Courtney took her by the hand and led her to the sofa in the living room. She told her about the abortion she had been through and about the beauty of childbirth. Courtney was both Project Hollywood's child and its mother. The next morning, a driver arrived at the house. Where's Courtney? Sleeping, I said. She's got a court date in an hour. He knocked on her door and walked inside. Shortly afterwards, a slew of dresses came tumbling out, followed by their owner. I need to find something to wear, she said as she slipped on various outfits, running in and out of the bathroom to check them in the mirror. Eventually, she left in a strapless black cocktail dress of Katya's, Herbal's $8 sunglasses, and Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power tucked under her arm. It's a silly dress because it's a silly case, she told court reporters that day. While she was gone, we inspected the damage. There were cigarette burns in Herbal's bedspread, slicks of unidentifiable liquid on the floor, candles still burning, and clothing flung over every light fixture. When Courtney returned from court, she sat with the house's cabal of pickup artists and planned her appearance that evening on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Mystery and Herbal taught her about concepts like social proof and framing. She needed to be reframed. The current frame everyone saw her through was that of a crazy woman. But having lived with her for 2 weeks, we knew she was just going through a bad period. She was eccentric, but not crazy. In fact, she was incredibly smart. So my new frame, then, is that I'm a damsel in distress, she said. That evening, she shone on the show. Unlike during her tabloid headline-making Letterman appearance, she was composed and well-behaved on camera. And a performance with an all-female band, the Chelsea, was a reminder that she wasn't just a celebrity. She was a rock star. It was bound to happen. Katya eventually reached someone in the house. It was Herbal who ultimately cracked. He liked to listen. He was modest and understated. After watching Katya suffer through Mystery's manipulations and neglect, he even began to believe that he was more worthy of her. It's getting harder and harder to say no, he told me. Just ask Mystery. He's probably over her by now. So, Herbal asked Mystery. The answer was no, but that evening, after fighting with Katya again, Mystery found Herbal in the living room. We're broken up. She's all yours. They were words he would soon regret. Since Courtney was sleeping in his bed, Herbal fucked Katya in Playboy's room off the kitchen. When Mystery returned home that night, he went to the kitchen for a Sprite. That was when he heard them. Katya seemed to be enjoying it, loudly. Mystery walked into the living room and collapsed on the floor. Like his father's death, it affected him more than he could have predicted. I love her, he said. The first tear trickled down his cheek. I love that girl. No, you don't. You said the other day that you hated her. The thoughts I'd been holding back for weeks came pouring out of me. All you like about her is her body. The only reason you're upset is because you feel rejected. No, I'm pissed at her for not loving me back. She sat with me one night talking about how scared she was to let go and really love you. And as soon as she did, you became a cold, shut-down, miserable bastard. In the morning, I checked on Mystery. He was sitting on his bed in his robe, shaking and convulsing. I'd never seen him like this before. When he was depressed in Toronto, he'd simply shut down. "I want to kill her." He rolled onto his back and moaned like a dying dog. Courtney poked her head in the door. "Is it about me? I can sleep in the front room if you want." She could be so sweet. I called Mystery's sister, Martina. "He's starting to crash again." "Well, if he gets any worse, I'll get him a ticket back to Toronto." And so it came to pass that Mystery started talking about killing himself, and I put him in my car and took him to the Hollywood Mental Health Center, and he tried to run away twice, and he wanted to hit on the therapist but couldn't. 6 hours later, he left the clinic with a package of Seroquel pills. I'd never heard of Seroquel before, so I looked at the pamphlet that came with it. "For the treatment of schizophrenia," it read. It was Lemonade Day at Project Hollywood. At least that's what Courtney Love had decided. Mystery was recovering, Katia was in New Orleans, and there were good vibes to be spread. Courtney grabbed a giant mixing bowl. Snatching 2 half-gallon cartons of lemonade and a quart of orange juice, she emptied them into the mixing bowl, and, when that overflowed, several pots. Then she grabbed a handful of ice cubes from the freezer and dropped them into her brew. Finally, she plunged her black charred fingers into each vessel and stirred. One by one, she dipped glasses into the bowl and filled them. Then she grabbed any clean coffee mug she could find and a Pyrex measuring cup and sloshed lemonade in all of them. In the living room, Mystery sat cross-legged on a couch, leading his first pickup seminar since returning from the mental health center 3 weeks earlier. "There are 3 phases to a relationship," he told his students. "There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'm going through the end right now. I'm not going to lie to you. I've cried 3 times in the last week." His 6 students glanced at each other. They were there to learn to get laid. Suddenly, Courtney came careering out of the kitchen. "Who wants lemonade?" The students looked at her dumbstruck. "Here you go," she said, forcing a glass on Mystery. "Where's Herbal?" "I think he's showering." Courtney dashed to the bathroom and kicked the door. "Herbal, are you there?" "What's going on?" Herbal stood there naked. "Is the house on fire?" "I made this for you." Courtney thrust the mug of lemonade in each of his wet hands and dashed away. Herbal stood there silently. Ever since he'd promised to stop talking to Katia, he'd been drifting through the house in a forlorn cloud of silence. Though he was too proud to admit it, his heart ached. I left the house for an hour to get some groceries. Only an hour. And when I returned, there was a red Porsche spewing smoke in the driveway and 2 pissed-off bleach blondes smoking on the patio. I went and introduced myself. "I'm Sam," said a slightly tomboyish girl. "I play drums." "We've met before, too," sneered the other girl. She was 2 inches taller than me. Her hair was pushed straight back over her head like a horse's mane, and her large brown eyes were framed with thick black mascara that reminded me of masturbating as a teenager to Susanna Hoffs in the Bangles video for Walk Like an Egyptian. This girl was the epitome of rock and roll. "Yeah," I stammered. "I saw you briefly at the Tonight Show." I couldn't imagine having forgotten her. Good posture is one of the things I find most attractive about a woman, and this girl's posture screamed confidence. It also screamed, "Don't fuck with me." The girls were visiting because Courtney had planned to tape an acoustic performance at our house, but Courtney was nowhere to be found. I sat down to pacify her bandmates. I felt so small next to them. I picked up a CD case that belonged to Lisa and thumbed through the discs. I was impressed. She had music by Cesaria Evora, a diva from the Cape Verde Islands. Her mournful songs, backed by a lilting Latin rhythm, are perhaps the best make-out music on the planet. As soon as I saw that CD, I knew I'd met someone I wanted to get to know better. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I dimly recalled what enabled me to interact with women before I discovered the seduction industry. Commonalities. Simply finding out that you have a passion for something another person also likes and respects is enough to fire that strange emotion we call chemistry. Scientists claim that when 2 people discover they have things in common, pheromones are released and attraction begins. Moments later, Mystery joined us. "I called Katia today," he said, and we talked for a while. I still love that girl." He looked at Sam and Lisa. "Did they know about the drama with Katia?" The girls rolled their eyes. They had their own drama to deal with. "Well," I excused myself, "I'm going to grab a burrito. Nice meeting you. Again." I had to get away from there. I didn't want to be associated with the madness, even if I was part of it. I walked down the hill to Poquito Mas, where I found Extra Mask sitting at a table outside, reading a book as thick as his skull. It was the first time I'd seen him alone in months. Ever since meeting him at Mystery's first workshop, I'd felt like he was my younger brother in this whole endeavor, though since joining the real Social Dynamics crew, he'd been more like an estranged sibling. "What are you reading?" I asked. "I Am That" by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, he said. Wow, impressive. I didn't know what else to say. I wasn't particularly familiar with Indian Vedanta writing. "Yeah, I'm starting to realize there's more to life than just girls. All this stuff," he gestured up the hill to Project Hollywood, "means nothing. Everything means nothing." I half expected him to burst out in laughter and start talking about his penis like the old days. "So, you're overcharging then?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm moving out." "Are you heading back to your parents' house or getting your own place?" "Neither. I'm going to India." "That's amazing. I want to figure out who I am. There's an ashram near Chennai, and I want to stay there." "Well, man, good luck." I awoke that night to see Courtney standing at the foot of my bed with a Prada shoe in her hand. "Let's redecorate. This will be our hammer." I looked at the clock. It was 2:20 a.m. "Do you have any nails or tacks?" Without waiting for an answer, she ran downstairs and returned with a box of nails, a painting for my wall, a throw pillow for my bed, and a smashed pink box that looked like an old Valentine's Day present. "This is the heart-shaped box," she said. "I want you to have it." She picked up my guitar and played my favorite country song, Long Black Veil. "I'm going to a friend's birthday party tomorrow night at Forbidden City," she said, dropping the guitar on the floor. "I want you to come, too." "I'll tell you what, I'll meet you there." I knew how long she could take to get ready. "Okay, I'll go with Lisa." "Speaking of Lisa," I said, "there were a bunch of people waiting for you here today, and you were nowhere to be found. I think they were pretty upset." Her face clouded, her lips puckered, and tears dripped from her eyes. "I'm going to get help. I promise." I wore a white blazer over a black shirt emblazoned with a scrolling bank of lights that could be programmed with a message. I input the words, "Kill me." I hadn't been out sarging in at least a month and wanted the attention. My expectations of Courtney showing up to Forbidden City were low, so I brought Herbal along as a wing. Within half an hour, we were surrounded by women. Felt good to flex our skills again. As a tall girl who claimed to be a model poured at my shirt, I saw a mane of bleach blonde hair sticking up out of the crowd. I looked closer. Her jaw was set, her face was chiseled, her eyes smoldered beneath a half shell of heavy blue eyeshadow. It was Lisa. I excused myself and ran up to her. "Where's Courtney?" "She was taking too long to get ready." I respect a person who isn't afraid to show up at a party alone. "I am the party," she said, without blinking or smiling. The entire night, Lisa and I sat side by side, the most peacock couple in the room. The party seemed to come to us, as if we exerted some sort of gravitational pull together. We were king and queen, and everyone else was our plaything. When the party broke up, Lisa put her arm around me and asked, "Will you take me home? I'm too drunk to drive." My heart slammed, and then settled into a rhythmic throb. Without waiting for a response, she dropped the keys of her Mercedes into my hand. I called to Herbal and asked him to drive my car home. "I can't believe it," I told him. "It's on." But it wasn't on. I drove Lisa back to her place. She went to the bathroom. I lay down on the bed and tried to look relaxed. Lisa padded out of the bathroom, looked at me. "Don't think anything's going to happen between us." "Damn it, I'm style. You have to love me." She changed, and we drove to my house to look for Courtney. All we found there, however, was Tyler Durden leading 10 men in the living room through some sort of exercise that involved running around the couches, yelling loudly, and giving each other high fives. I took Lisa up to my room, lit some candles, put Cesario Evora in the CD player, went to my closet. Let's have some fun. I pulled out a garbage bag full of old Halloween costumes, masks, wigs, hats. We tried them all on. We took a photo, smiling, then serious. For the third photo, the romantic pose, we gazed at each other. Her eyes seemed so happy. Behind that tough exterior was vulnerability and tenderness. I held her eye contact and moved towards her for a kiss. "I'm not kissing you," she barked. The words scalded my face like hot coffee. There was no girl I couldn't kiss within half an hour of meeting her. What was her problem? I blew out the candles, stopped the music, turned on the lights, and checked my email. She climbed onto my bed and went to sleep. Finally, I joined her, and we slept on opposite sides of the bed. I still had one trick left, going caveman. In the morning, without a word, I started massaging her leg, working my hand slowly up her thigh. If I could just turn her on physically, her logic would disengage and she would no doubt submit. My intention wasn't to use Lisa for sex. I just wanted to get the whole sex thing over so we could be normal together. But as I began to rub the warm crease where her thigh meets her pelvis, her voice rang shrill in the air like an alarm clock. "What are you doing?" She smacked my hand away. We had breakfast together, and lunch, and dinner. We talked about my writing and her music and our lives. She was my age. She said something intelligent every time she opened her mouth. She laughed at my jokes that were funny and made fun of the ones that weren't. She spent another night with me. Nothing happened. I had met my match. After breakfast, I stood on the front stoop and watched Lisa leave. She climbed into her Mercedes and pulled away. I turned around to climb the stairs. I didn't want to glance back. I wanted to look cool and not give her any more IOIs. "Hey, come here," she yelled. I shook my head no. She was ruining my exit. "No, seriously, come here. It's important." I sighed and walked back down to the car. "I'm really sorry," she said, "but I think I might have accidentally dented your limo when I was pulling out." My body went cold. It was our newest and most expensive possession. "Just kidding," she said, stepping on the accelerator and leaving me in the dust. For the first time since I'd learnt the word one-itis, I had it, and I knew that I was doomed. The next night, Lisa left town to play a festival in Atlanta with Courtney. She called while she was gone. "Are you free for dinner when I get back?" "I don't know," I told her. "It depends on whether you can behave yourself or not." "Fine," she said, "if you're going to be like that." I was just trying to tease her, and in doing so, I had destroyed the moment. It was time to be straightforward. "I want to see you when you get back. I'm leaving town for 2 weeks, so it'll be our last chance to hang out." In the background, I could hear Sam speaking. "You're talking to him like he's your boyfriend." "Maybe I want him to be my boyfriend," Lisa said to her. I couldn't wait for her to come back. I wanted her to be my girlfriend, too. I spent the entire day of Lisa's return plotting the perfect seduction. I would pick her up from the airport in the limo, Herbal would drive, and I would wait for her in the back seat. Then I'd take her to the whiskey bar at the Sunset Marquise Hotel, walking distance from Project Hollywood. Her flight was scheduled to arrive at 6:30 p.m. As Herbal drove the limo past the Delta terminal, I mixed Cosmopolitans at the bar in the back of the car. When the flight arrived, however, she wasn't on it. I was confused, but not disappointed yet. Herbal drove me home, and I left a message for Lisa. When she didn't call back, I left another message and then waited all night in vain to hear from her. At 5 o'clock that morning, I was awakened by my cell phone ringing. "Sorry to wake you up, but I need to talk to someone." The voice on the other end was a man's. The accent was Australian. It was Sweater. "I tried to kill myself today," he said. "What happened?" "My wife is expecting our first baby in 10 days. She's driven me away from my friends. My business partner is leaving me. She spends all my money and all she does is complain. And now that she's having this baby, I'm trapped." "But you were in love with her. How can she just change?" "No, the problem is that I changed. It was too hard to be that person who mystery taught us to be. That person wasn't a good guy, and I like doing nice things for people, so I got her whatever she wanted. I sent her flowers 3 times a week. But it didn't work. Sweater had pretended to be someone he wasn't just to seduce a woman, and now he was suffering the consequences. "When I first got into the community, I wrote down everything that I wanted," he said. "And now I have the money, the big house, and the beautiful girl. But I never wrote that she had to treat me with respect. and kindness. Later that morning, Courtney returned to the house. Did the rest of the band get back from Atlanta yet? I asked, trying to sound casual. Yeah, they came home on an earlier flight. I turned away quickly. I knew if I said anything in response, my voice would betray my disappointment. Courtney threw a bundle of sage on the coffee table. Let's clear the air in here, she said. Then she skipped off to the kitchen explaining, we need some rice for good fortune. Unable to locate any rice, she returned with a package of jambalaya mix and a bowl of water. She poured the jambalaya mix into the water, planted the sage in the middle of it, and then ran to her room. She emerged carrying a blue and white checkered shirt. This will work, she said. It's one of Kurt's. I only have 3 of them left. She carefully arranged the shirt underneath the table so that it could bring good energy to the house. After lighting the sage, she sat Mystery, Herbal, and me down next to her makeshift altar, and we joined hands. Her grip was bone-crushing. Thank you, God, for this day and all that you have given us, she prayed. Please bring peace and harmony and friendship under this roof. No more tears. And help me win my court case in New York and help clear up all my other problems. I will work with you, God. I really will. Give me strength. Amen. Amen, we repeated. The next day, a driver came and whisked Courtney to the airport to go to New York. There, her prayers for herself would eventually be answered, but the atmosphere in the house would only grow darker. Mystery and Herbal sat facing each other on opposite couches, their arms folded across their chests. The other permanent residents, Papa, Xenaeus, Playboy, and me, sat on a third couch. We had called a meeting to resolve the dispute between Mystery and Herbal once and for all. We allowed each to present his side of the story without interruption. Mystery said he would not allow his ex-girlfriend to set foot in the house again, and Herbal said he would move out if his girlfriend couldn't come over. After 3 hours of go-nowhere debate, during which Papa oddly didn't speak once, we asked Mystery and Herbal to give us some privacy to come to a decision. That was when Papa spoke for the first time. I will not live in the same house as that guy. Who? I asked. Mystery. Papa's hands trembled. Disrupts my workshops, and I'm worried he's going to harm me. What are you talking about? He wouldn't do anything to you. But the more we talked about it, the more complex the dilemma seemed. Papa wouldn't live in the house with Mystery. Mystery wouldn't live in the house with Katya, and Herbal wouldn't live in the house without Katya. Someone had to go. All the problems in the house can be traced back to one source, Playboy said firmly, and that source is Mystery. I looked at Xenaeus. Do you agree with Playboy and Papa? I do, he said. We called Mystery and Herbal into the room to give them our decision. Herbal, I began. Katya will not be allowed in the house for 2 months. After that, if you're still dating her, she may return. Herbal nodded. Mystery, you have 2 months to get over Katya. In addition, there will be a zero-tolerance policy for violence in this house. If you attack anyone or damage property, you will be asked to leave immediately. Mystery didn't nod. So basically, you're saying you want me out and that bitch gets to replace me? No, I said, we're giving you 2 months. You're a financial, mental, and emotional mess, and you have no one to blame but yourself. Mystery dropped his head into his hands. His shoulders started shaking. I'm a broken man. I'm broken. What should I do? Tell me what to do. Tears began leaking out of my eyes. After 2 years in the seduction community, I still didn't have a girlfriend. But for some reason, I had bonded with this big, blubbering genius. You need therapy, I said. You can't just keep doing this to yourself. I had a headache. It had been a long day. As I started down the hill to grab a burrito, a black Mercedes convertible whipped around the corner. Inside were 2 blondes. The car screeched to a halt and a voice yelled my name. It was Lisa. She wore a red diesel jacket that made her look like a cross between a supermodel and a race car driver. I was unshaven, wearing sweatpants. I felt so many emotions at once: embarrassment, excitement, resentment, fear, joy. We're going to get a drink, Lisa yelled. Do you want to join us? What are you doing here? I tried to appear unfazed by her sudden reappearance. Going to the whiskey bar. Didn't you just pass it? Yeah. I came by to ask you to go with us. Do you have a problem with that? A touch of attitude. I still liked her. Let me change and I'll meet you there. I slipped on a pair of Levi's red jeans and a military-collared button-down shirt and ran down the hill to join them. But when I arrived, Lisa and Sam were at a table with two heavily tattooed rockers. I sat between them, dwarfed by ink and hair dye. An overwhelming anxiety took hold of my body. I didn't want to make small talk. I wanted to be alone with Lisa. I jumped up. I'll be right back. I needed to sarge, not because I wanted to pick up women, but because I wanted to get into a positive state. As I ordered a drink at the bar, I turned around to see two women in black evening dresses. "Hey guys, let me get your opinion on something." "Let me guess," one of them said. "You have a friend whose girlfriend is jealous because he still talks to his ex from college." I grabbed my Jack and Coke, shuffled out to the smoking patio to a two-set sitting on a bench. "Hey," I said, "how long have you guys known each other?" "About 10 years, one of the girls said. I could tell. "I have to give you guys the best friends test." "Oh, we know that one already," she said politely. It had finally happened. The Sunset Strip was sarged out. I walked back to Lisa and her friends. "I'm wiped out. I'm going to head home. But I'm driving to Malibu tomorrow to surf. You and Sam should join me." Lisa looked up at me, and for 3 extraordinary seconds, the rest of the club disappeared. "Yeah, all right," she said. Before we left for the beach, I showed Sam and Lisa the photos I had taken the night we played dress-up with the wigs. "Look at that," Sam said, when she saw the photo of Lisa and me staring into each other's eyes just before we didn't kiss. "I've never seen Lisa look so happy." "Yeah," Lisa said, her lips spreading into a toothy smile. "I guess you're right." When I surfed in the past, I usually hung out close to the shore, riding the smaller waves. But after helping Sam and Lisa get comfortable on their boards, I paddled out with the expert surfers to try and catch a big wave. As a wall of blue grew in my peripheral vision, my body tensed. I wondered if I could handle a wave this big. It grabbed my board with a crack, like pealing thunder, and I leapt to my feet. The blue stretched out far overhead. I cut through the open face all the way to the top of the wave and maneuvered to shore. I felt ecstatic. I didn't think I had the knowledge and the skill to take a wave like that. For the first time since junior high, I felt like writing poetry. When we returned home, I pulled Lisa aside. "I'd like to take you out for sushi on Saturday." It was so AFC of me. She hesitated for a moment, as if she were deciding the best way to let me down easy. Then finally she spoke. "Okay, I guess." "You guess?" "No, it's just that—" "Never mind. Yeah, I'd love to go. I was wondering when you were finally going to ask." "That's better. I'll pick you up at 8. I took Lisa to a Japanese restaurant called Katana. It was one of the toughest dinners of my life. We'd spent so much time together already that I literally had no more material left. I was forced to be myself. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," I said as sake warmed our stomachs. "What happened to you after Atlanta? We had plans and you broke them." "You were rude on the phone," she said, "and I didn't think we had definite plans anyway." So, it had been her version of cat string theory, punishing me for bad behavior. I was being cocky, funny. "I wanted to see you. Whatever, you were rude. You were being too cool for school, and it was a turnoff." As we talked, I tried to figure out why I liked this girl so much. Why, after meeting so many people, she had become my obsession. A cynical part of me said I was simply falling for the female equivalent of the tactics we use. And then there was always the remote possibility that she had managed to touch a part of me that I kept hidden from everyone, even myself. A part of me that had wanted to stop worrying about what everyone thought of me and just let go and be free in the moment, the way I felt surfing that big wave in Malibu. We drove back to my house. Lisa slipped into a white t-shirt and boxers, and we lay on the bed as we had so many times before, heads turned towards each other, but no part of our bodies touching. "So, what made you drive up the hill the other day to see me again?" "While you were gone, I realized how much I missed you." I loved watching her lips part over her front teeth when she talked. "I actually went grocery shopping while you were gone so I could cook you food. I don't know why." A warm flush of confidence filled my chest. "But it's too late," she said. "The window was open with me, and you blew it." David D'Angelo would have said to go cocky funny here. Ross Jeffries would have said not to buy into her frame. Mystery would have said to punish her. But I had to ask, how did I blow it? First off, you didn't call me when you came home from Miami. I had to go to you. Hold on. You never called while I was away. Well, your voicemail said you were out of town and you weren't returning calls, so I didn't leave a message. Yeah, but I would have returned your call. Then you came to the whiskey bar and hardly talked. So then why did you agree to go out with me tonight? You asked me out on a proper date, and you were a little nervous, so I figured you must really be into me. I propped myself up on the pillows. I was about to say the most AFC thing of my life. Let me tell you something. The pickup artists have a word they call one-itis. It's a disease that people get when they become obsessed with just one girl, and they never end up with the girl because they get too nervous around her and scare her away. So, I said, you're my one-itis. We were looking at each other in the eyes now. I could see hers sparkle. I knew mine was sparkling. It was time to kiss her. There were no lines, no routines. I leaned in. She leaned in. Her eyes closed. My eyes closed. Our lips met. It was just like I'd always thought a kiss was supposed to begin. Lisa and I spent the next day together, and the day after that, and the day after that. I kept worrying that I was going to ruin it, that she was going to get tired of me, but we couldn't seem to part. You're so perfect for me, she said as we lay in bed for the fourth night in a row. I never had sex with a guy I liked this much before. I'm afraid I'll get attached. When I slept with all those other girls, I just had sex with them once a night, and if I liked them enough, a second time in the morning. But something amazing happened with Lisa when we had sex for the first time. After I had an orgasm, it didn't go down. It remained, as the old extra mask would say, rock hard and luscious. I did it with her a second time. Feel it, I said afterwards. It was still ready to go. We did it a third and a fourth time that night. I couldn't understand it. My dick had feelings too. Sex with Lisa was not entertainment. It was not about validation and ego gratification. It was about creating a vacuum where nothing else existed except the two of us and our passion. It made the rest of existence seem like a distraction. And then, one afternoon, just when I'd forgotten all about her, Courtney returned. She pulled up to the house in a limo and leapt out, looking radiant in a blue dress and a white shawl. There's blood flow to my pussy again. Did you land that director you were chasing? No, I got a new man in New York. She danced towards me, light like a ballerina. I heard all about you and Lisa. I think that's great. So some good came out of having me in the house after all. Yeah, for you too, I hope. I don't even want to think about what went on in that house. Well, you look great. Getting laid has done wonders for your complexion. Well, that and rehab. Her prayers had been answered. A few days later, Lisa and I went to the Scientology Celebrity Center. Tom Cruise had kept his word and sent me an invitation to their annual gala. After dinner, Cruise, in a perfectly pressed black tuxedo, walked towards the table. His approach was hypnotic. There was no doubt in his walk, no effort in his smile, no intricacy in his intentions. I stood to shake his hand, and he clapped my shoulder. I kept my balance, barely. Is this your girlfriend? He asked, looking Lisa up and down in a non-lecherous way. You didn't tell me how gorgeous she was. Thanks. I can't remember ever feeling this fulfilled by someone. So, you got tired of picking up women? Yeah, after a while it started to feel like filling a bucket with a hole in it. Exactly, he exclaimed. In a real relationship, sex means more. You just want to keep going, and you want to hang out all the time and talk about life. It's very cool. Yeah, but the problem is that it just reaffirms society's message of true love conquering everything and all those Hollywood happy endings. It just seems so cheesy. Who says it's cheesy? Cruise asked, his eyes narrowing and his hands reaching out to attack me with a friendly gesture. You know what? I got past that. Since when is it cheesy to be in love? He had amogged me again. Ghosts. We were just phantoms drifting through a putrefying house. Mystery wasn't talking to Herbal. Herbal wasn't talking to Mystery. Papa had hardly spoken to anyone. I sat uselessly in the living room and watched Mystery pack the last of his possessions. The platform boots, the ridiculous peacocking hats, the pinstripe suits he no longer wore. "So where are you going?" "I'm going to start Project Vegas. I've learned from my mistakes here, and Project Vegas will be bigger and better. There are hotter women in Vegas, and great opportunities for doing casino magic." Mystery's manic sense of possibility was back. "And since you're my best friend, once I get it set up, I'd like you to join me." "I'm sorry, man." "It'll be Mystery in style, just like the old days." He opened the front door. "I can't go through this again." The words, apologetic, came out accusatory. "I understand," he said. "Sometimes events turn sour. I want you to know that you are the most important man in my life." A cab pulled into the driveway and Mystery slammed the door shut on Project Hollywood. The blank whiteness of the door wavered in the mist of my eyes. I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. Without Mystery, the house became even more uncomfortable. Whenever I walked through the living room, I'd find new roommates lying on the carpet, playing video games. They never looked up or said a word, even when I greeted them. When I saw Playboy packing his books into his boxes, I asked the usual, "What's going on?" "I'm moving out." First Extra Mask, then Mystery, and now Playboy. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked. "I want to get something off my chest before I leave." Playboy brought me into his room and shut the door. "They're trying to freeze you out." "Who's trying to freeze me out?" "Papa and Tyler Durden. They're using tactics on you." "What do you mean by tactics?" "Well, you really have no idea what's been going on up in Papa's room. Tyler Durden is telling everyone to ignore you. He wants you to think that everyone hates you. He's trying to make you uncomfortable in the house." "Why would he want to do that?" "He wants to take over, and he sees you as a threat. To his finances because you want him to pay rent, and to his women because you made out with that girl he picked up in Vegas." "He's still upset about that?" "Yeah, but I think the main problem is that Tyler and Papa associate you with Mystery, and he's their competition. They want to make the whole house an office and dormitory for real social dynamics." At 2 a.m., Lisa, making her nightly entrance, stomped up my stairs, shedding her purse and clothing on the way, and leaped onto my bed wearing nothing but a beer bottle. "I'm attracted to you in every way." "Really? Do you know what all the ways are?" Maybe. Emotionally, physically, and mentally." "That's a lot of ways." "I can elaborate." "Okay. Let's start with the physical." That's probably the area where I still needed the most reassurance. "I love your teeth and your mouth especially." I listened for hesitation or doubt. There was none. "I love how broad your shoulders are and how narrow your hips are. I love the color of your eyes. I love the shape of your nose. I love the indents on the side of your head." "Oh, my God." I flipped on top of her and grabbed her shoulders. "No one has ever complimented me on my head indentations before. I love them, too." I laughed, a little too loudly, at the ridiculousness of what I'd just said, and then I told her about the last 2 years of meeting players and learning about the game. I told her about the AFCs and the IOIs and the AMOGs. "I would love to have you dress up super hot one day," I said, caught up in the excitement of the game, "and then go to a bar and I'll practice AMOGing all the guys who try to hit on you." She rolled off me so that we were facing each other on our sides, our faces an inch apart. "You don't need to take their advice," she said, her breath intoxicating and intoxicated. "Everything I like about you is all the stuff you already had before you met those PUA guys." From outside, we heard the sound of men climbing the hill, flush with the excitement of another night out almost getting laid. "All the things you learned from the PUAs almost made us not come together," Lisa continued. "I want you just to be Niel. Balding, nerdy, glasses and all." Maybe she was right. Perhaps she would have liked the real me. But without all the training, I would never have had the confidence to talk to and handle a girl like Lisa. I needed Mystery, Ross Jeffries, David D'Angelo, Steve P., Rasputin, and all those other pseudonyms. I needed them to discover what was me to begin with. And now that I'd found the person and learned to accept him, perhaps I'd outgrown them. Lisa sat up and took a sip from the beer bottle. Everyone was hitting on me tonight. Modesty was never her strong suit. I hope you realize that you are dating the most fabulous girl in L.A." In response, I grabbed 2 large manila envelopes and brought them to the bed and turned them upside down. Hundreds of paper scraps, matchbooks, business cards, and cocktail napkins spilled out. Each one contained the handwriting of a different girl. "I know you are. I've spent 2 years meeting every girl in L.A., and out of them all, I chose you." It was the most beautiful thing I'd said in a long time, and after I spoke it, I realized it wasn't entirely accurate. If there was anything I'd learned, it's that the man never chooses the woman. All he can do is give her an opportunity to choose him. Herbal was the next to go. I saw him from my bedroom window, stuffing his robot vacuum cleaner into a van. I ran out to talk to him. "Why, after all you went through with Mystery, you're going to leave?" "I just felt like the house had been a failure," he said. "Papa keeps moving in guys I don't really like." "What's Katia doing?" "She's moving to Austin with me." Outside of Papa and Tyler Durden, everyone seemed to be waking up from the spell the community had cast on them. I didn't need to be here anymore. Still, I couldn't help thinking, if I was so smart, how did Papa end up with the house? Lisa answered that question as we lay in bed together that night. Because you didn't want the house. It's not a life. It's a subculture. How could something be good that's based on false reality and a learned behavior? Walk away. Watching The Wizard of Oz as a child, I was always disappointed when Glinda the Good Witch told Dorothy that she possessed the power to return home since the moment she had arrived in Oz. Now, 20 years later, I understood the message. I had possessed the power to leave the community all along, but I hadn't reached the end of the road until now. We were all searching outside ourselves for our missing pieces, and we were all looking in the wrong direction. The answers were to be found within. To win the game was to leave it. Even Extramask had discovered that. After staying at an ashram in India, he was coming home to, as he put it in an email, the way things were before. In the morning, I was awakened by noises downstairs. 3 new recruits for Real Social Dynamics were hauling boxes from IKEA into Herbal's room. The troops would be sent to the Sunset Strip nightly to do battle, armed with my clothes, my stories, my mannerisms, while the generals in the bathroom plotted the last stages of their conquest of the community. I returned to my room and started packing. Hanging over me were rows of peacocking garments, a fuzzy purple vest, a pair of black vinyl pants, a pink cowboy hat. Stacked on the floor were dozens of books on how to be the jerk women love. I wouldn't need any of those where I was going. Real life beckoned.